Chapter 5400. Jojo. He lowered his head to tighten her cloak before hugging her tightly. It won't happen again. Arbor pursed her small lips and punched his back. These past 2 days, Mother has been nagging me, saying that I don't know how to take care of a child and that I'm unreliable. She didn't see you. You're even more unreliable. Emolian quickly promised. Next time, I'll definitely be reliable, extremely reliable. Xiaomu hummed in response and nodded proudly. All right, then I'll forgive you this time on behalf of my son. When did you notice that he was missing? Emolian asked curiously. A minute before you woke up. Emolian. He looked at her, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Then aren't you the same as me? What's the same? Okay, not the same, not the same. She really was at sunder a baby, bristling as soon as she was mentioned. Emolian didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he quickly reached out to pacify her. You're reliable. You're the best mother in the world. The little stoic felt more at ease and nodded with a okay. Of course. In the dark night, a figure flashed in front of them. A pair of bright eyes on a pitch-black face smiled at them. Master, this way. The two people walked hand in hand under the moonlight for about half a quarter of an hour before they couldn't help but look at each other in dismay. What was going on? They really wanted to ask. How did their son run all the way from the Easter Palace's main hall to this remote courtyard? Both of them tensed up and didn't speak. However, Huifeng said very understandingly, Master, little master is especially awesome. When I was crouching on the tree, I saw him float out of the bedroom's window and float all the way here. He didn't pause at all. He also didn't come down to rest. We encountered a wild cat on the way. This subordinate was afraid it would bite little master, so before I could do anything, I saw that cat suddenly fly out with its 4 hooves upside down. Huifeng pointed at the roof across from them. It's over there. As parents, their feelings were a bit complicated as they looked up at the roof that Huifeng was pointing at. Sure enough, he saw a multicolored kitten curled up on the roof, trembling and screaming pitifully. The little stoic's mouth twitched, and she expressionlessly said, Take it down. Alrighty. Huifeng suddenly leaped onto the roof and brought the kitten down in a few moves. Sir Jojo and Prince Emo looked at each other with complicated expressions. Their own son had sneakily floated out of the main hall, and as parents, they actually didn't know anything. This was really the biggest joke in the world. When the two arrived at the entrance of the small Buddha hall, 2 hidden guards stepped forward and pushed the door open, bowing to invite the two inside. The 2 of them stepped through the door, only to see 2 rows of faint candlelight illuminating the room. The room was burning with silver charcoal, but it didn't seem cold. A large bed was placed next to the praying mats in front of the shrine. There were 2 mattresses and 1 mattress. It looked really thick and warm. Their son was lying on Empty's stomach, and the 3 little imps were sprawled out in their sleep. Empty's fist was pressed against the little monkey's face, and the little monkey's feet were stepping on Guangguang. Guangguang was curled up in the bedding next to them, not caring about his head and exposing half of his butt. This row of sleeping postures was truly incomparably ecstatic. Arbor couldn't resist chuckling. Looking at these comical little guys, all the anger in his heart disappeared without a trace. Emolian looked at him with a smile in her phoenix eyes. Chapter 5401. The 2 of them walked up and adjusted the children's sleeping postures. They wanted to reach out to hold baby Mo, but they discovered that the little monk was tightly protecting him with both hands. Emolian originally wanted to gently pry open the empty hands, but she discovered that his brows were twitching, as if he was about to wake up. Arbor tugged at her and said softly, Let's go out first. The 2 of them lit up the silver charcoal fire a little before walking out hand in hand. After closing the door to the small Buddha hall, they couldn't help but smile at each other. Huifeng walked up with a grin and said, Master, little master is amazing. He's such a small baby. So what do you think all these things came from? He pointed at the empty pots and plates that several hidden guards carried over and said with a chuckle, Little master, and the other 3 brought out the remaining half after they were full. I even suspect that they purposely brought it out to reward us. Emolian's mouth twitched. It was obvious. Otherwise, they wouldn't have brought it out. These children were all shrewd. Arbor glanced back at the small Buddha hall in amusement. You don't know, but after they were full, Little Master took out a large quilt and mattress and went to sleep on the floor. The hidden guards were stupefied at that time. They really didn't expect that Little Master, who was still so young, could move soup, water, quilt, and mattress into his inner world just like that. But the problem was, when did he take these things? Mo Lien waved her hand, dismissing Hui Feng and the others. She turned to look helplessly at Jojo. Wife, is there something you haven't told your husband? Arbor blinked and coughed lightly. It's not a big deal. It's just that I only discovered it recently. Our son seems to be able to enter and exit the star domain at will. Chocho told me in private. Our son isn't like you guys, who need to carry a branch of the sacred tree by his side. After leaving the sovereign capital, he can't enter the star domain. Our son seems to be able to enter the star domain at will wherever he goes. He can also summon holy water, holy wood, and holy earth. I just don't know if he can see a vast star field in his dantian. Mo Lien widened her eyes and looked at her little wife in disbelief. Then what about him? Arbor nodded sincerely and patted Mo Lien's waist sympathetically. He should be the richest baby in the world. Mo Lien didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she looked at her. She smiled and joked, My dear Xiao, then wouldn't all your hard work over the years have been in vain? You're just making a wedding dress for your son. A son doesn't need a wedding dress. Okay. Everything my Joe says makes sense. Arbor blinked, leaned into his arms, and said softly, Actually, after knowing this, I'm very happy. Although our little dumpling has already broken through to the 10th level of the divine realm at such a young age, he is truly too small and too weak. Sometimes when I look at him, it seems that anyone can break his thin arm with just a finger. Now that the situation is tense and uncertain, danger lurks everywhere. I feel much more at ease knowing that little dumpling has the star domain to protect himself. At the very least, if bad people came to capture him, he could immediately hide in the star domain, couldn't he? Jojo, be good. Don't worry, okay? Mo Lien lowered his head and kissed her gently on the forehead. With you and me around, we will protect little dumpling. We definitely won't let anything happen to him. Jojo, don't worry too much, okay? Chapter 5402. Arbor nodded. Mo Lien, now I can truly understand Long Chiyun's mentality back then. Back then, she tried her best to conceal the truth and didn't tell me anything. Arbor said with a faint sigh. Actually, she didn't want me to come to the divine continent. As a mother, she only wanted me to let go of the burden of hatred and grow up peacefully and obediently. Even if she left me in a small farmhouse, as long as I could grow up happily, I think she would be perfectly satisfied. She didn't ask for you to be rich and noble, only for you to be healthy for the rest of your life. This was Mother's initial wish. Seeing her in his arms, Mo Lien gently caressed her cheek and said, Perhaps all the mothers in the world think this way. Arbor tilted her little head and glanced at him. Your son strolls outside in the middle of the night. This is a very bad habit. How do you plan to educate him? Mo Lien didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Even if I reason with him, he probably won't listen in his current state. Besides, even if I reason with him with my fists, you won't agree. If he dared to lay a finger on his son, with his wifey's protective personality, it was hard to guarantee that he wouldn't be beaten to death, forget it. Arbor took out a spirit binding rope from her inner world. How about tying him to me tonight? Mo Lien was speechless. After a long while, she said in amusement, I don't think this little spirit binding rope can bind our son. Arbor blinked and nodded in all seriousness. She raised her hand and patted her husband's chest. Husband, then make a rope that can bind him. This important task could only be left to the divine weapon master in front of her. Mo Lien didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Inside the Ministry of Justice's dungeon, at the end of the corridor, in the innermost and dark prison cell, Su Shitao's hair was disheveled. He pounded on the prison cell door and shook it vigorously as he roared. Where's everyone? Where did they all die to? You bastards! How dare you treat me like this? Sooner or later, I will put all of you to death by 1,000 cuts. Princess Consort Zheng was sitting cross-legged in the cell adjacent to hers. Although his face was dark and gloomy in the cell, at least his clothes were still clean and tidy. Unlike Su Shitao, who had been jumping up and down in the cell for the past 2 days, no one paid any attention to her. Instead, she had made a mess of herself. Su Shitao smashed the prison door for a long time, but seeing that it didn't budge, he panted and fell to the ground. He pounded the wet grass under him and screamed angrily, "That bitch! How long are you going to keep us here? None of this has anything to do with me. It has nothing to do with me." She simply hated it too much. The whole thing clearly had nothing to do with her. But in the end, with just a few words from that slut, she was thrown into such a dark dungeon, never to see the light of day again. What was she doing? Just because she was the crown prince consort, did she think that she could cover the sky with one hand and make everyone who didn't like her suffer? Su Shitao pounded the prison cell hatefully. He suddenly turned his head and looked at Princess Consort Zheng, who was sitting steadily in the neighboring cell. He simply couldn't vent his anger. Su Shitao raised her nose and eyes, and she couldn't help but shriek, "Shi Yongyan, you're actually very calm. Huh? Heh, you didn't scream or jump these past few days. You ate whatever food was given to you and drank whatever porridge was given to you. You even lived quite comfortably." Chapter 5403. Su Shitao was on the verge of a breakdown, but his good sister-in-law was calmer and more composed than anyone else, as steady as Mount Tai. This was the greatest irony in the world. Compared to this sister-in-law, Su Shitao felt that she was practically a born clown. She hopped here and there all day, but in the end, not only was she of no help, she even became a laughingstock for this sister-in-law every day. Although her sister-in-law didn't say it, she must despise her in her heart. Su Shitao shouted harshly, "Sister-in-law, I'm not criticizing you. After all, your maternal family is a reputable and prestigious Shi family in Dragon Flame City. After this happened, look at yourself. What did you get? Did your maiden family send anyone to visit you? Did they send you some food and a change of clothes? Nothing at all. Heh. After we entered the prison, all our spirit weapons and treasured clothes were plundered. Even our inner worlds were sealed. Every day, we can only live with grievances. We can't eat enough and sleep well. Has your maiden family ever cared for you in the slightest? Nothing at all, right? To think that you can still live so calmly. Aren't you the least bit anxious?" Seeing that Shi Yongyan didn't say anything, Su Shitao was so angry that she kicked the wooden pillar of the adjacent prison cell and shouted in exasperation, "What are you so calm about? You've long been abandoned by the Shi family. If I were you, I wouldn't be able to keep up the pretense. The Shi family doesn't want you. My big brother doesn't want you either. Heh, you're really a failure as a person." Su Shitao seemed to have gone mad as she mocked and ridiculed the silent Princess Consort Zheng. Princess Consort Zheng frowned and said indifferently, "Are you done scolding? I advise you to save your energy and have a good rest. We don't know how long we have to stay here. We might have to stay here for the rest of our lives. What you're doing is completely meaningless." Su Shitao's entire body stiffened, and the malicious smile on her face abruptly froze. Impossible. Her shriek almost pierced Princess Consort Zheng's eardrums. Princess Consort Zheng knitted her brows in discomfort and shot a glance at the agitated Su Shitao. Do you think your big brother will still come and save you?" Princess Consort Zheng's expression was calm, as usual, as if she had already seen through everything. "That day, I followed the Crown Prince's secret guard back to King Zheng's mansion. After the secret guards broke through the defense line and rushed in, your big brother had already disappeared. Your father and mother have been taken away. Xiao Wei and Mrs. Lin also left. Do you know what this means?" Princess Consort Zheng sneered. "It's not that I'm an abandoned chess piece. Including you, you and I are all abandoned pawns." Su Shitao's body stiffened and trembled. He shook his head and cried out anxiously, "No, that's impossible. 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 I don't believe it. I don't believe it." Su Shitao roared, "Even if my big brother gave up on me, my parents wouldn't treat me like this. Princess Consort Zheng looked at her mockingly and smiled coldly at her. Su Shitao, do you still not understand? Your father, your mother, and your elder brother are the most selfish people in the world. They would disregard their own safety to save you. Just think about it in your dreams. Right now, they can't wait to hide. So how could they possibly show themselves? Princess Consort Zheng harumphed. The crown prince has already led people to raid the entire Prince Zheng estate. But did you know? Not a single valuable item in the estate was found. Chapter 5404. What does this mean? Princess Consort Zheng gazed coldly at Su Shitao and said word by word, "It means that they already knew that the crown prince would bring people here to clean up, so they packed their bags and prepared to flee. It's just that this list of escapees doesn't include me, much less you. You are merely a pawn in their hands, to be discarded once they're done using you." "Shut up!" Su Shitao yelled angrily, trembling from head to toe. His entire body was trembling uncontrollably. She rushed to the wooden pillars of the neighboring cell and viciously kicked those thick pillars as she raged hysterically. "You're spouting nonsense. You're lying to me. You're lying to me." However, Princess Consort Zheng sat there motionlessly and glanced coldly at her before softly spitting out, "You're so pitiful. Make a detailed inventory of everything and make a list." Dugu Ling leisurely stepped over a patch of withered yellow grass, his gaze landing on a row of servants who were in the midst of taking inventory of goods. On the hillside, there were boxes of supplies. The accountant was holding an account book and leading a few capable servants. They were shuttling back and forth among the supplies, quickly counting the items. Eldest young Sir Qin curiously walked over with young Sir Omega Kitoku and glanced around. "Second brother, I didn't expect that you would be able to gather so many things from a trip to King Zheng's estate." Duguling couldn't help but giggle when he heard this. That King Zheng personally said that he didn't want these things. Rather than benefiting that Prince Imo, why don't we strike first and gain the upper hand? Eldest young Sir Qin blinked. "How can you do this?" Duguling turned around and looked at this eldest young sir like he was looking at an idiot. "Young sir, many of our underground money houses and shops have been raided and smashed by the Crown Prince and his men recently. Our losses are also very disastrous. These things are merely a drop in the bucket, and we might not be able to make up for everything." The eldest young sir sighed as he fanned himself. "You should at least leave something for the Crown Princess. This way, if everything is raided, won't she have nothing left?" Duguling's mouth twitched. He simply didn't want to continue speaking with this eldest young sir. Omega Kitoku said coldly, "Present a gift." "That's true." The eldest young master nodded. "Jojo just gave birth to a child. Logically speaking, as his uncles, we should give him a generous gift." Duguling looked at the sky, speechless. "Brothers, what is the relationship between us?" He fought openly and secretly with the Crown Prince, wreaking havoc and fighting for resources. When it came to the young Crown Princess, everything became a mess. If the Patriarch knew about this, he would probably be so angry that he would jump 3 feet high from his stool. "Young Master, the inventory is almost done." The bookkeeper stepped forward and respectfully bowed to the young masters. Then, he presented an account book. Second young master took it and skimmed through it. Then, he took the pen from the accountant's hand and ticked something off on the ledger. "Pick it out and sort it out. Send it to the Eastern Palace." The accountant glanced at second young master in bewilderment and said cautiously, "His Highness the Crown Prince didn't find anything useful in the King Zheng estate a few days ago. If we send such a generous gift over, wouldn't it be a bit a slap to the Crown Prince's face?" Eldest young master waved his fan with a grin and said in unison with Omega Kitoku, "Precisely a slap to his face. Did this pig-like Crown Prince think that he could raid anywhere? Let him pounce on nothing. Let him not raid. Let him stomp his feet. Let him be angry." Chapter 5405. The Qin Estate's eldest young master and second young master present gifts: 2 bottles of pure jade heavenly dragon pills, 3 bloodwood roots, 1 smoke-billowing cloud rope, 1 green feather zither, a pair of heaven-winding silk hoops, a pair of mountain snow deer cubs. Mo Lien expressionlessly sat in the main hall as he listened to the servants report each gift. His eyes contained a cold glint as he faintly stared at the long list of gifts that had nearly fallen to the ground. The servant reporting the gifts only felt that His Highness the Crown Prince's gaze was touching. He hurriedly wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead with his sleeve, swallowed, and continued to recite for nearly an hour. Finally, he read, an additional 50 million spirit coin cards. After reporting the gifts, the Eastern Palace servant didn't even dare to raise his head. He knelt on the ground and held the list, not even daring to breathe loudly. Even from such a distance, he could feel His Highness the Crown Prince's displeasure. At this time, if he dared to provoke His Highness, he would most likely die. Sir Jojo leisurely walked in with the baby in his arms. He felt the stifling atmosphere as soon as he stepped into the hall. The little eunuchs and palace maids of the Eastern Palace all hung their heads low and breathed softly, as if they were afraid of angering the man sitting at the head of the table. Jojo's Lotus. Arbor walked up and looked at him in confusion. Why did he look so depressed? Who provoked him? Seeing that he didn't speak, Arbor stuffed the baby in his arms into his hands. Hold the baby. Emolien held the baby with one hand and pulled her to sit beside him with the other. With a cold expression, he waved at the servant kneeling below with the gift list. Leave. The servant acted as if he had been pardoned and hurriedly kowtowed to His Highness the Crown Prince. He stood up with the gift list in his hands and bowed before retreating. That person is holding a long list. What is it? It's a gift for Jojo. Arbor blinked and shifted his small body to nudge him. Who's giving Jojo a gift? Mother did mention to me that she wanted to hold a 1-month-old banquet for the child, but it hadn't been held yet, had it? The invitations for the banquet had not been sent out yet. How could there be people coming to the capital to give Jojo a gift? Who was so considerate? Emolien's entire body emitted a chilly aura. She said in a low voice, who else could it be? Those 2 brothers. Jojo tilted his head and thought for a while. He frowned and said, Chinda Omega Kitoku? Yes. These 2 bastards hid outside Dragonflame City and did not show up, but they were up to no good every other day. Did she think you'd be angry about this? Wasn't it just that he was a step slower than them, and the items in King Zhang's residence were picked up by those 2 grandsons? As for being so complacent and sending people to deliver gifts, it was probably to slap him in the face. They wanted to tell him, don't be complacent, the contest has just begun. You raided the Qin estate, but we will retaliate. We will empty the entire King Zhang's residence before you do. We will make you angry, make you cry, make you suffer, and make you angry. What a shameless pair. Arbor arched in his arms. Jojo's Lien, you're angry. No, Mo Lien replied stiffly. Arbor rolled his eyes and put a hand on his chin. I'm so angry is written all over your face. Mo Lien was indeed angry. It had been so many years, but those 2 brothers still did not give up. What? Were they still planning to steal his woman? Jojo would not like the 2 of you. If there was anything, there would have been something already. Oomph. Chapter 5406. I didn't expect those 2 brothers to be such bad people, but the gifts they've sent time and time again aren't bad. Arbor nodded emotionally as he flipped through the long list of gifts. Mo Lien lowered his eyes, and the corner of his mouth silently twitched. Our 3 states and their heavenly fate organization are like fire and water. We are irreconcilable, so why do they keep sending me gifts? Arbor put down the gift list and straightened his back to look at Mo Lien, but he called out Kaichi. Carefully inspect the gifts they send over several times. It's the Crown Princess. The young Crown Princess turned to look at Prince Mo and said with a frown, I wonder if they're up to something. But it's strange. Although they're not very good people, the gifts they send over are quite proper, as if they've never tampered with them. Emolien couldn't help but be taken aback. She then asked in exasperation, could it be that you've had people carefully inspect the gifts sent by Eldest Chin's Omega, Kitoku, more than once all these years? Arbor nodded with a solemn expression. Aside from Brother Duan Yu's, the other gifts have to be carefully inspected. How would she know if there was anything fishy in the gifts that those people had given her? Emolien, what was going on? Why did Duan Yu seem to be everywhere? This man was so annoying. Jojo, Prince Mo, who was holding a cub, turned his anger into joy and looked at her with a grin. Do you know why they sent you gifts? Arbor nodded solemnly, disdain flashing through his eyes. To make things difficult for me. To make me unhappy, angry, and furious. I won't fall for their tricks. She would just accept the gifts and not think about anything else that would affect her mood. Emolien. If those two fools from the Qin estate knew Jojo's answer, they would probably cry themselves to death. It wasn't a matter of a day or two that the little fellow had a super high IQ and a negative EQ. Jojo, actually, Sir Qiao Qiao waved her small hand and hugged Emolien's arm as she said, "You mustn't fall for their tricks. Those two bad guys gave me those things just to drive a wedge between us. He wants to make us hate each other. You won't fall for it, will you?" The little stoic swept a glance at Emolien and asked suspiciously. Emolien was really speechless. He looked at her for a long time, then pulled her into his arms and lowered his head to take 2 bites. Why are you so annoying? What did he mean by falling into a trap within trap? He was both amused and angry at the same time. She likes you. After all these years, this guy really didn't feel anything at all. Should he be happy or worried? This little guy was so defenseless. Fortunately, he made the first move. I'm so muddle-headed. I don't even know when I've been tricked. Sir Jojo was enraged and punched him on the head. He shouted angrily, "What nonsense are you babbling in front of our son?" She was a mother now, so she had to establish a lofty image and prestige in front of her son. Emolien didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He lowered his head and nibbled on her lips again. "Punishing you." Arbor was flustered and exasperated. "You want a rebel?" Emolien only spat out one word when he felt a slight warmth on his knee. Fuck, this little imp was really up to mischief whenever he saw his dad. He lowered his head to look at his son's expressionless face and pinched Jojo's puffy cheeks. "Stop fooling around. Your son pooped." Chapter 5407. Eat Dorado. Emolien grumbled as he tirelessly changed his son's diaper and washed his little butt. "Hubby, it's been hard on you." Jojo stood a little further away and looked sympathetically at Jojo's lotus. She didn't know if it was out of habit, but her son could always defecate smoothly in front of her husband. This was probably a husband's special talent, right? Emolien looked back at her and shook her head in amusement. "Jojo, you can't even keep that gloating look on your face." Was that so? Arbor raised her hand to touch her little face. Hubby must be tricking her. She clearly had a stoic little face and no expression at all. "Jojo, you said before that little fur ball can enter and leave the star sector freely?" Arbor nodded. "Yes, but I don't think I've ever seen him go in and out." Arbor was slightly taken aback when she heard this. She thought for a moment and said, "Although I haven't seen him before, since Chocho said so, it shouldn't be false." Emolien looked at Arbor. Arbor took a few steps forward and looked at the baby who was wrapped in her husband's blanket again. She blinked and said, "Little fur ball, if you can go in and out of the star sector, why don't you perform for mommy?" With that, the child in front of her disappeared. Arbor wasn't mentally prepared. When she saw her son disappear, her heart tightened, and she hurriedly looked into the star sector. On the hillside of Paradise Planet, he saw the baby lying on the ground. Arbor heaved a long sigh of relief and hurriedly said, "Little fur ball, come out." Sure enough, baby Mo appeared in front of the couple and lay obediently on the small round table, as if he had never disappeared in front of them. Arbor had a proud expression on her face as she tugged at Emolien's sleeve and called out softly, "Jojo's lotus, did you see that?" Xiao Tuanzi can understand my words. He can understand. The one in front of you is a baby at the 10th level of the divine realm. Naturally, it is impossible for him to be mentioned in the same breath as an ordinary person. Emolien rubbed the little stoic's head in amusement and said softly, "It's indeed not bad that he can enter and leave the star domain on his own, but this way We might not be able to keep this little imp locked up in the future. So, you have to make a rope to tie him up as soon as possible. Xiao Mu patted Emollien's back in all seriousness and said in all seriousness, I'll have to rely on hubby for everything. Emollien was speechless. She lowered her head and rubbed her forehead. Let's take action tonight. Let's go to the ruined temple in the western suburbs to investigate. Previously, our people stopped at the outskirts of the thatched forest on the eastern peak. It said that there's a Baihu town up ahead. I wonder how it's doing now. Jojo naturally knew what Emollien was worried about. After all, wherever Heavenly Fate passed, it would be a mess. They had built so many underground bases in the past and devoted themselves to breeding zombies, as well as mutated species of demonic cultivators and superhumans. It was hard to say what would happen to that Baihu town. Previously, Yuan Maui said that she would use a drop of blood to feed Sapling's fragment every 3 days. Arbor's face darkened when she said this. I wonder if Sapling's fragment will be contaminated by that woman's dirty blood. She was a bit worried when she thought of this, but Sapling couldn't sense the fragment's exact location right now, so there was nothing she could do. Let's go check it out tonight. Arbor pinched her son's little paw through the blanket. Put the children on Paradise Planet and let Sapling play with them for a while. Sleep soundly. Catch up on sleep tomorrow. Chapter 54:08. At night, after the two of them made arrangements for the children, they quietly left the Eastern Palace and rushed toward East Peak Mountain hand in hand. The two of them used a transportation talisman and arrived near East Peak Mountain in a flash. Looking at East Peak Mountain up close, Arbor couldn't help but be slightly speechless. Duanmu, Little Fatty, and the others ran here every day to undergo the five spirits' reincarnation tribulation. Look, half of the mountain was flattened by the lightning and fire tribulation. Sir Jojo harumphed. I knew Heavenly Law. That old geezer wasn't a good person. Look at this mountain. How much force did it use to strike Little Fatty and the others to cause the mountain to be flattened? Emollien couldn't help but be speechless upon hearing this. Heavenly Law reckoned that it was also quite difficult. After encountering so many people lining up to undergo the five spirits' reincarnation tribulation in succession, it had probably been swamped with work during that time. When Arbor turned around, she saw her husband's small, indescribable expression. The little stoic wrinkled her nose and cast him a glance. What could it be that you still feel that Heavenly Law isn't easy? Emollien quickly shook his large head vigorously and said repeatedly, How could that be? Heavenly Law, that old geezer, doesn't know what's good for him. What's there to pity? Jojo, hubby will always be on your side. Sir Jojo finally nodded in satisfaction. Where should we go now? Emollien was about to speak, but he suddenly grasped Arbor's arm and turned around to cast a chilly glance into the night. A black night bird suddenly flapped its wings and fluttered past them from the treetops beside them. This place is quite strange. Emollien said softly to his wifey, I'll hold your hand. Follow me properly and don't run around. Arbor couldn't resist rolling her eyes at him and muttered softly, I never run around. Emollien couldn't help but laugh when he heard this, and he raised his hand to rub her nose. Stop bragging. I don't know who it is, but he often runs away in the middle of training. Arbor pursed his lips and thought, I didn't do it on purpose. Most of the time, it was quite difficult for her as well. Perhaps she would encounter some kind of opportunity out of nowhere. In short, don't leave my side. Emollien grabbed her little hand and turned to remind her, we don't know what dangers lie ahead. Don't be rash. Who's impatient? Your whole family is impatient. Sir Chow Chow glared at Crown Prince Emo with a huff. The latter smiled at her good-naturedly and held her hand as they walked towards the mountain path of the East Peak. In just a moment, 3 black-clothed men rushed out from the mountain path. The leader cupped his fists and bowed to Prince Mo. Greetings, Your Highness, Crown Princess. Behind him was a man and a woman. The woman's eyes flashed as she followed the man beside her and silently bowed. Arbor glanced at them and found that they were 3 familiar faces. They were the Dou family's eldest young Master Dou Fengyan, second young Master Dou Fenghua, and third young Miss Dou Fengqi. These three people had clearly deliberately waited here for a long time and made a special trip for the two of them. Emolien frowned and glanced at them indifferently. "Were the two young masters of the Dou family waiting for us here?" The Dou family's eldest young master, Dou Fengmian, hurriedly stepped forward and bowed again. He said humbly, "Reporting to your highness, there have been strange noises in Maolin town recently. Previously, our family had already sent many people to investigate and are more familiar with the path and environment there. We specially waited here and are willing to lead the way for your highness, Crown Princess." Chapter 5409. They saw the Crown Prince and his wife looking at them with a slightly hesitant expression. Dou Fengmian hurriedly added, "To tell you the truth, the Dou family only discovered it by chance a while ago. His Highness sent people to keep an eye on the ruined temple outside the thatch forest. Since it's a place that even His Highness the Crown Prince is keeping an eye on, it can't be ignored." Dou Fengmian sighed. The family immediately sent people to investigate carefully. They wouldn't have known if they hadn't investigated, but once they did, they were shocked. It turned out that the ruined temple in the thatched forest near Dongfeng Mountain was actually Zhao Wang's old headquarters. The Dou family had always believed that no one lived in that ruined temple. Who knew that it actually hid such a big secret? Dou Fengqi pursed her lips and muttered, "Big brother, if we continue talking, those people in the town might really escape first." Right. Dou Fengmian hurriedly nodded. "Can you two talk as we walk?" Prince Emo and Sir Jojo looked at each other and exchanged glances. They nodded and followed the three people from the Dou family toward the thatched forest. "Our Dou family has been keeping an eye on Maolin town for more than a month. Now, I feel that the situation is no longer something that our small Dou family can control." Dou Fengmian whispered, "On weekdays, we can see the townspeople of Baihu Town going out to hunt or buy things in the morning and afternoon. In the past few days, we haven't seen anyone go in or out at all. The entire town seems to have fallen into a deep sleep without any signs of life." As they walked, the second young master of the Dou family, Dou Fenghua, explained the strangeness of the situation to the Crown Prince and his wife. The two of them looked at each other and clasped their hands tightly together. It seems that the situation really isn't good. Soon, they arrived outside the forest under the guidance of the three people from the Dou family. Maolin town, which consisted of 100 households, appeared deathly still and extremely quiet under the cover of night. You could practically hear the sound of pin dropping. Arbor held his breath and silently followed beside Emolien. After walking for a while, they arrived at the memorial arch at the entrance of the town. The sky was gloomy and dark, as if a thunderstorm was about to descend. Before the first drop of rain fell, Arbor took out a fire thunder umbrella from his inner world and handed it to Emolien. Emolien was a little amused. While opening the umbrella, his other hand was still holding her little hand. The raindrops fell in a split second, and the speed was a little shocking. The weather had been fine just a moment ago, but now it was as if a hole had been pierced through the sky. Torrential rain poured down on the Dou clan's trio. Even though the two young masters of the Dou family had activated their defensive barrier quickly, they were still unable to withstand the frightening rain. Half of their robes were still soaked. Dou Fenghua looked back silently. When she saw the Crown Prince and his wife snuggling together, she couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Who would have thought that the couple who weren't thought too highly of on Seacombe Planet back then could actually reach this step now? Crack! A streak of lightning flashed across the horizon, completely dispersing the darkness in front of him. A ghastly pale, old face abruptly appeared in front of third Miss Dou. Dou Fengqi wasn't mentally prepared at all. When she suddenly saw such a frightening old face appear in front of her, she couldn't help but shriek. She was so frightened that her entire body trembled, and her body slid limply to the ground. Dou Fengmian's eyes were sharp, and her hands were nimble. She hurriedly reached out to support her younger sister and casually threw a streak of spiritual energy at that ghastly pale old face. Chapter 5410. In the blink of an eye, More than half of that ghastly pale old face was charred by Do Fengmian's spirit energy. Do Fengxi trembled uncontrollably in fright and scrambled to hide behind her two older brothers. Arbor focused and saw that the two young masters Do were already locked in combat with the old zombie puppet. This old zombie puppet moved like an ordinary cultivator above the 10th level of the spirit realm. Not only was it abnormally fast, but it could also smoothly release the light of spirit energy from its palms. Every time he saw the two young masters Do evade the spirit energy released by the old zombie puppet, Arbor couldn't help but knit his brows. This zombie puppet didn't need to eat or drink and wasn't afraid of pain or injury. Who could endure the two young masters Do's reckless fighting style? It wouldn't take long for the two young masters Do to retreat in defeat. Thus, Arbor looked up at Jojo's lotus. The latter gave him a reassuring look and released a golem with a wave of her hand. This person's appearance was strikingly similar to Lu Yizhi and moved very quickly. It leaped in front of the two young masters Do and intercepted the zombie puppet. Do Fengxi scrambled to roll in front of her two older brothers and cried out anxiously, "Eldest brother, didn't you say that these things are still under control?" Do Fengmian's expression was also very grave at this time, and she turned to whisper to the crown prince, "Your Highness, I think we have to speed up and go in to take a look. Our Do family had arranged for many people here before and could basically control the abnormalities within a certain range. But now, why did this thing suddenly run to the village entrance to attack them? Didn't this mean that the Do family members left behind to guard this place might have already been encircled and annihilated by the zombie puppet?" The three Do family members were burning with anxiety and hurriedly led the two inside. The golem with Lu Yizhi's appearance was left at the village entrance to continue dealing with the white-haired old zombie puppet. At the same time, a dazzling bolt of lightning glided across the sky above the Ministry of State Security's estate. This madam, unwilling to be left out, was currently lying on the brocade couch with her fragrant shoulders half exposed and her clothes half undone. Only after hearing the low reports from the servants outside the door did she finally smile. "Hurry up and bring her in. It's so cold. Don't let my beauty freeze." Madame Goen gently shook the round fan in her hand and smiled at the servant at the door. The servant answered, "Yes," and pushed the door open shortly after. A gust of cold wind blew in. Even though the madam was very charming, she couldn't help but shiver slightly. A trace of astonishment flashed through his heart. "What's going on?" Madame Goen thought to herself that she had never felt cold on a winter night before. Even if she was wearing a thin shirt, she was not afraid of the cold. What's going on today? She actually felt a trace of coldness from the depths of her heart. She hurriedly shook her head and suppressed the indescribable uneasiness in her heart. What was there to be afraid of? She had been waiting day and night for this day. Nothing could go wrong. Madame Goen stood up from the couch, and her soft silk sash fell to the ground. Barefooted, her figure graceful and elegant, she walked step by step from the brocade couch to the person who had been carried in through the door. "Hee hee." Madame Goen smugly smiled at the unconscious person. "All right, you can all withdraw." She personally took that person and let him lean against her. Looking down, she saw a fair face with tightly shut starry eyes and tightly pursed thin lips. His handsome face was slightly pale, but he still had the bearing of a beauty. Chapter 54:11. Madame's heart was abnormally happy, and she was a little excited. She reached out to stroke the man's fair face, and she muttered to herself, "Darling, this time, there's finally no one who's going to disturb us." The servants of the Ministry of National Security didn't even dare to breathe loudly. They silently hung their heads and quietly stayed by the door like statues. However, Madame Gua felt that these people were a bit of an eyesore, so she raised her hand and waved it at the servants on both sides. "All of you withdraw." Today was her big day of joy. She had looked forward to it for so long, and finally waited for this day with great difficulty. No one or anything could ruin her excellent mood. Madame Gua carried him in her arms, and she half dragged and half pulled him to the brocade couch to lie down. Her tender and sweet gaze lingered on the man's face, and she couldn't help but raise her hand, about to reach out to stroke him again. But she suddenly saw that the man on the brocade couch suddenly opened his eyes. At this moment, that pair of pitch-black eyes were coldly staring at her, as if the person in front of him wasn't her Madame Gua, but merely a loathsome, mangy dog. Madame Gua didn't expect him to suddenly wake up, and she suddenly jumped in fright. She couldn't help but be flabbergasted. She reflexively asked, "How did you wake up?" "That's right. How did he wake up?" Logically speaking, with his frail and ordinary body, after being drugged with this level of incapacitating drug, it was impossible for him to wake up without 3 days and 2 nights. Where exactly did this go wrong? Madame Gua glanced at fifth young master, puzzled. At this moment, the person she placed on the couch and carefully treated like a pearl or a treasure was precisely Qin Xiu, one of the Qin estate's 5th dukes. Qin Xiu coldly stared at her, his gaze as if he was looking at a corpse. This kind of gloomy gaze caused Madame Gua's heart to involuntarily jump, and she hurriedly teased, "Darling, why are you looking at me with such a gaze? Do you know how much I miss you in my heart?" "Don't worry. I've already ordered all the servants in the courtyard to leave. Tonight, there's only the 2 of us in this small courtyard." The lady of a national security agency threw a coquettish glance at the 5th young master shamelessly. "You can open your arms and be with me at ease." 5th young master Qin looked at her icily and sneered. "The Ministry of State Security. You're dead meat." He really didn't expect the Ministry of National Security to be so lustful. After the incident at the Qin estate, the Ministry of National Security had been sending people to inquire about him both openly and secretly. She thinks that the Qin estate has already become a stray dog, and the members of the Qin estate are completely powerless to resist, right? Therefore, he, a pitiful person with no cultivation base and no ability at all, was bound to become the property of the National Security Bureau and could be tortured by her as she wished. "Darling." Madame Goen didn't know that she was about to die. She called her with a smile and directly took off the 5th young master's outer shirt. "Darling, the night of spring is short. Let's not waste any more time. You're so disgusting." The 5th young master suddenly flung her hand away. Caught off guard, Goen was flung out and slammed into the opposite door frame. Clang! A loud sound rang out. As expected, the small courtyard was very quiet. Just as Goen said, she had chased out all the servants in her courtyard because they were a hindrance. Now, there was no one by Goen's side, and there was only her and Qin Xiu in the courtyard. Seeing that Qin Xiu's handsome face was still very seductive in anger, Goen swallowed her saliva. Chapter 54:12. She had yearned for the men of the Qin estate for a very, very long time. The 5th young master was elegant and simple, and Goen had always been unable to forget him. Today, she had obtained him by chance with great difficulty and had long forgotten her parents' names. She was currently looking at the person in front of her in a daze, not even anticipating the impending danger, until an enormous force lifted her up and heavily smashed her onto the table. Then she fiercely tumbled to the ground. Madame Goen finally came back to her senses in astonishment and hastily tried to crawl up from the ground. But unexpectedly, a staff heavily smashed into the back of her head. This hit stupefied Madame Goen. She also raised her head in confusion, only wanting to glance at that 5th young master. A pair with staff had appeared in this 5th young master's hand at some unknown time, and he suddenly smashed it down. Even a level 12 great spiritual master like Madame Goen was smashed into a daze. Clutching her head full of blood, Madame Goen couldn't help but cry out, "What are you doing?" Qin Xiu looked at her expressionlessly and suddenly reached out to grab her by the throat, his handsome face covered in a malicious expression. It was truly traveling far and wide in search of something, only to find it without any effort. He had wanted to kill this bitch for a very long time. Now that she had delivered herself to his doorstep, how could he not make a move? On the other side, Madame Goen felt her throat tighten as she stared incredulously at the man in front of her. She opened her mouth, but was unable to spit out a word. How was this possible? When they met at the banquet a while ago, This fifth young master was still an ordinary person without any cultivation. But now, how could he suddenly clamp down on her? What was even more laughable was that she, a grand level 12 great spiritual master, actually couldn't break free from the hands of this ordinary person. This was simply the biggest joke in the world. Madame Gowan did her best to inhale and exhale as she stammered, "You let go, I have something to discuss. Who would have thought that fifth young master Chin would actually smile at her? That extremely cold expression actually had a near-fatal attraction, causing Madame Gowan's struggling movements to involuntarily stifle. "Do you think I'm still that pitiful little thing from before that you can do as you please to me?" Chin Xiu's fingers tightly clutched Madame Gowan's neck as he sneered, "You no longer exist." That lowly, pitiful, coward of her already completely no longer existed. Soon, this matter would be resolved. All the humiliation and unbearable humiliation that this slut had brought upon him would eventually become a thing of the past. "Gowan, you will die in a different way. It will definitely be unforgettable. No, you can't kill me. I am Glory City's City Lord's adopted daughter. I am the current empress." Madame Gua's voice suddenly stopped, and she suddenly let out a miserable howl. The fifth young master had actually used an extremely cruel method to create this pair of hands. Gowan was in so much pain that he couldn't stop trembling. He was on the verge of collapse. But then she heard that devilish voice ring in her ear. "Didn't you want to play with me? This is only the first step. Dong, 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 dong." What happened? The old woman who was on night duty walked over from the drooping flower gate. She rubbed her eyes as she walked and glared at the young eunuch who was pounding on the garden gate in displeasure. "What time is it now? Can't you wait until dawn to report? Nanny Lee, hurry up. Hurry and inform Her Majesty the Empress. Just say that something has happened to Madame Gowan." The young eunuch who came to report couldn't help but shudder. Chapter 54:13. The main reason was that Madame Gua's dead face could be said to be terrible. Not to mention that there was no piece of good flesh on her body. The whole body was almost torn into pieces, and it was difficult to sew and mend them. The little eunuch vomited again and again at a glance, and he dared not close his eyes tonight. He was afraid that as soon as he closed his eyes, he would recall the horrible picture. Recently, Madame Gua came to the Empress every 2 or 3 days to chat with her, as if they were sisters. Although the Empress had always been very indifferent to Madame Gua, she had never hated her for the sake of the old city lord of Glory City. Every time Madame Gua came to talk about something, the Empress entertained her very well. Those who could work in the imperial palace were all sophisticated people, and they all saw it and remembered it in their hearts. They knew that although Madame Gua was not liked by the little crown princess, she still had some face in front of the Empress. When Mammy Lee heard that Madame Gua had an accident, she did not dare to neglect. She quickly took a token from the little eunuch and hurriedly turned to leave. It was raining heavily. Mammy Lee walked quickly to the door of the bedroom with a sullen face. At this time, the movement outside the door had alarmed several nannies on night duty. Mammy Lee quickly reported it to the supervisor nanny, who thought for a moment and said, "It's still early, and His Majesty hasn't got up yet. I'm afraid it's inconvenient to disturb him rashly. How about this? When it's a little bright and His Majesty gets up to go to the court, we'll go in and report it to the Empress." Mammy Lee nodded repeatedly and deliberated with several nannies. Finally, she said to the supervisor nanny, "It's all up to you." His Majesty disliked it most that someone disturbed Her Majesty's rest. Even the matter of Madame Gua was certainly not an important matter in His Majesty's view, and he could not disturb the Empress at will. Several nannies stopped outside the hall and waited for the sound of rustling to come from the bedroom when it was a little bright. Then the supervisor nanny took the lead and knelt outside the hall to ask for an audience. Soon, the small door of the partition in the bedroom was opened from the inside. The head palace maid, Pearl, stood at the door with an indifferent expression and asked, "What is it?" Signaled by the supervisor Mammy, Mammy Lee hurriedly crawled forward a few steps and respectfully handed over a waist token. Replying to Miss Jinju, "There is a piece of news from outside the palace." Madame Goen was killed in her residence for no reason. The steward of Madame Goen's residence specially sent someone to report this to your highness. Jinju's eyes flickered slightly. She glanced at Mammy Li and said, "Come in with me." Mammy Li bowed her head and followed Jinju into the bedroom in fear and trepidation. She carefully followed her step by step. Just as he stepped into the hall, he stole a glance at the indistinct figure behind the curtain. She then heard a cold and low voice. "It's so early in the morning. Why did you disturb the Empress?" Mammy Li was so scared that her face turned pale. She quickly knelt on the ground and stammered, I deserve to die. There's a reason for this. There's a news outside the palace." Bai Wuxia helplessly pulled the man's clothes and said, "Why are you yelling at her? Go to work. Don't you have to go to court early today?" After that, he said softly to Mammy Li, who was kneeling outside the curtain and didn't dare to raise her head, "You don't have to panic. Just make it clear." Mammy Li was relieved and replied in a low voice. Chapter 54:14. Reporting to Nyang Yang. The sky has yet to brighten today. The steward of Madame Goen's mansion hurriedly sent the news to the palace. Madame was killed in her home late last night. No one knows why she died. The steward was very vague and didn't make it clear. The emperor took back his leg and looked at Mammy Li, who was kneeling on the ground in astonishment. He waved his hand, and a black shadow drifted in front of him. "Your Majesty, go and see where the little bastard and his wife are now." Bai Wuxia helplessly twitched the corner of her mouth and glared at her husband with resentment. This guy said it in front of all the servants. Was his son shameless? The emperor touched his nose, rolled up his sleeves, and sat down beside the empress. He told Jinju, "Serve the meal. I'll accompany Wuxia to eat before leaving." Jinju responded with a smile and quickly left to serve the breakfast. Mammy Li knelt there with cold hands and feet. She didn't dare to raise her head, and her heart was beating fast. The empress's gentle voice came to her ears. "Mammy, get up. Don't panic. Go and bring the person who sent the message here. This consort wants to ask him a few questions." Yes, yes. Mammy Li breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. When she stood up, she found that her legs and feet were a little weak. Mammy Li quickly stabilized her body, bowed, and pushed out the door. Soon, the little eunuch who delivered the message was brought to the emperor and the empress. At that time, the two had just had breakfast. Bai Wuxiao whispered to the emperor to hurry up and do the business. However, the man had to stay here and wait for the secret guard to bring the news back. The empress felt a little helpless, but she couldn't say anything in front of outsiders. She just glanced at him secretly. The little eunuch trembled as he repeated what he knew. This servant deserves to die. This servant went to the Ministry of National Security to take a look at Madame. Her tragic state was shocking. This servant did not dare to take another look. The empress nodded and comforted him in a warm voice. This is human nature. I just want to know the reason. I don't mean to blame you. You don't have to panic. Get up. The little eunuch was flattered and nodded repeatedly. He quickly stood up with a trembling body. The empress instructed the chief palace maid, Pearl, to take out some spirit coins to reward the little eunuch, and then ordered someone to send him out. A moment later, a hidden guard who had gone out to investigate the situation flashed into the bedchamber through a side door. He bowed and greeted, "Your Majesty, Nyang Yang." The great emperor glanced at him. "Pumpkin, tell me about the situation." The shadow guard said in a low voice. This subordinate went to take a look at Madame Goen's mansion. Indeed, as the news said, Madame Goen's death was quite tragic. All the skin on his body is broken, as if he had been sliced into pieces. Are the little brat and his wife in the Eastern Palace now? The empress reached out and patted the emperor. She pursed her lips in displeasure. How can you suspect your son and daughter-in-law? The emperor thought, with the little stoic daughter-in-law's methods, this isn't necessarily impossible. Madame Goen had offended the little stoic several times in the past. It was very likely that they didn't deal with her previously because their daughter-in-law didn't have the time to deal with her. Now that the baby was born and everything was fine, they might think of her when they were free. Shadow Guard Pumpkin glanced at the great emperor with an odd expression. He then respectfully replied, Your Majesty, the Crown Prince left the city in the middle of the night yesterday with the Crown Princess and headed to East Peak Mountain in the western suburbs. They haven't returned to the palace yet. What? The Great Emperor and the Empress were shocked. Nonsense. The Great Emperor cursed gloomily. Chapter 54:15. Why are these two brats so worrisome? The Crown Prince, this brat, was too deceitful. How could he not understand his wife's situation after giving birth not long ago? Why did he bring his wife out of the palace for a stroll at East Peak Mountain? What good could happen if they sneaked off to East Peak Mountain in the middle of the night? When did they leave? Bai Wuxia hastily questioned. Late at night. This subordinate speculates that it was around the same time as Madame Goen was killed. Goen's estate was in the east and west of the western suburbs, which meant that the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess couldn't have attacked Goen. These two brats were busy with other matters last night and simply didn't have time to care about Goen. That was strange. Then who exactly did the National Security Agency die for? According to the hidden guard's description, it seemed that she had a deep-seated hatred for the person who killed Goen. The Empress and the Emperor looked at each other and saw a trace of graveness in each other's eyes. An unknown person infiltrated Goen's estate and killed Goen. There was something fishy about this matter. Your Majesty, please go to court first. I'll go to Goen's estate to see what's going on, Bai Wuxia said softly. At the same time, thousands of corpse puppets surrounded a residential house in Maolin Town. Bang, bang, bang. They smashed the transparent defensive shield on the outside and let out roars one after another. This residence originally belonged to the mayor's family. Currently, the residence's main hall was packed with people. Other than Mo Lian, Arbor, and the three young masters and young misses of the Dou family, the old mayor of Maolin Town was leading more than 100 townspeople to block the entrance with weapons in hand. They were afraid that those things outside would break in so that they could resist them in time. Mo Lian beckoned to the old mayor. No need to be so nervous. Perhaps they were affected by the Crown Prince and Crown Princess's calm mood, but the originally tense crowd felt a bit better. The old mayor said shakily, "This commoner and the others truly deserve to die. We didn't expect to cause His Highness and Her Highness the Crown Princess to fall into such danger." No need to worry. The little stoic Crown Princess comforted him. She had reinforced the outside with dozens of defensive needle techniques. Within 6 hours, those things would not be able to break through the door. Besides, it wouldn't be difficult to bring these people away safely. They just wanted to clarify some things first. The old mayor continued in tears. Most of the townspeople in our town listened to Zhao Wang's nonsense and joined in. If it weren't for the two great masters of the Dou clan coming to remind us, we would still be in the dark. Dou Fengyan said with a cold face, Tianyun is really abominable. He used bright light to attract some innocent people into the organization and used them as test subjects for all kinds of drugs. I pity these innocent townspeople. Dou Fenghua sighed. By the time the Dou family found out, it was already too late. Most of the townspeople had already consumed Zhao Guang's improved medicine, becoming neither human nor ghost and beginning to mutate. The old mayor wiped his tears and said, "The rest of us only dare to hide in the cellar during the day and sneak out at night. I want to escape, but I have no way to do so." Fortunately, the young masters of the Dou clan came and sent many people to help us. But this evening, for some reason, those corpse puppets suddenly became violent. During the resistance, the Dou clan sacrificed many people. There were also some corpse puppets that escaped from inside the town. I don't know if they've already left the town. Mo Yin nodded and summoned a shadow guard to instruct him in a low voice. Go to bed early tomorrow night. Chapter 54:16. Could it be that there's something outside the town that's attracting them? Dou Fengyan said in a low voice. Dou Fenghua nodded thoughtfully. That's very possible. After all, why would the zombies that had always been obediently wandering around the town suddenly become irritable and start a massacre this evening? There had to be a reason for this strange occurrence, but they didn't know for the time being. Arbor glanced at the sallow and emaciated old mayor. Then his gaze swept over the 100 or so townspeople behind him. These miserable Malin Town townspeople had been miserably deceived by the organization Bright Light. They originally thought that if they joined Bright Light, they wouldn't have to fear being bitten by zombies for the rest of their lives. Who knew that this organization itself was an organization of swindlers? They tricked them into joining Bright Light in order to use their families and friends as experimental subjects. Looking at their current dejected appearance like stray dogs, Arbor didn't need to think to know that many of their relatives and friends must have mutated into zombies. The old mayor of Malin Town suddenly knelt in front of Arbor and Mo Yin with a plop and said in a tearful voice, "Your Highness the Crown Prince, Crown Princess, please help us, the townspeople." He truly regretted his past actions now. If he had known that Bright Light was so vicious, he would have given these townspeople a warning, even if he had to sacrifice his life. Those pitiful young children were transformed into corpse puppets, and they didn't even have the chance to refuse. This was all his fault. He hadn't dissuaded them and pulled them out of that fiery pit. Arbor signaled to the side with his eyes. Immediately, a hidden guard walked forward and single-handedly lifted up the sobbing old mayor from the ground. He shouted in a low voice, "Stand properly." The old man was so frightened that his legs went weak, and he stood there stiffly. "Don't worry, old man," Mo Yin said faintly. "We came here this time to eradicate this malignant tumor, Bright Light." The rumbling outside suddenly grew louder. It sounded like thousands of zombies were attacking a part of the defensive barrier with all their might. It was as if they were trying their best to break the defensive barrier in front of them within a few minutes. Yuba walked in, bowing to Mo Yin Arbor with a strange expression. "Crown Princess, Your Highness." The corpse puppets are organized in a well-trained manner and are launching a fierce attack on the defensive barrier in the south. If this continues, I'm afraid the defensive formation will be completely destroyed in less than half an incense stick's worth of time. The old mayor and others were so scared that their faces turned pale. They couldn't stop trembling. Could it be that they were about to clash with their friends and family? Over the past few days, they had watched their relatives and friends turn into zombies, walking corpses one by one. They felt extremely uncomfortable in their hearts. Now they had to kill their own relatives and friends with their own hands. How could they accept this? Arbor glanced at them and asked, "Would you like to stay in the storage talisman for a while?" The old mayor and the others nodded repeatedly. Instead of letting them watch their relatives and friends die one by one in front of him, he was powerless to save them. It was better not to see, not to hear, not to think. Most of the townspeople were very willing to hide in the storage talisman. Seeing this, Arbor put the old mayor and the townspeople into the storage talisman. Something came up at the last minute. Tomorrow afternoon, around 4 o'clock. Chapter 54:17. The shouts and roars from outside traveled into everyone's ears. Sir Jojo and Prince Imo met each other's eyes. Imo Yin grasped her small hand and asked with a wink, "Wifey, are we going to charge out and fight?" The little stoic glanced at him and silently gave him a look that said, "You're a fool." Prince Imo was taken aback. He then glanced at his wifey's small face and inexplicably didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What was going on? Wifey was looking at him like he was an idiot. Right Arbor was expressionless. His small hand darted out of his sleeve and abruptly released little Fatty and the others from the star domain. "We came out to stretch our limbs." The little stoic coughed lightly and said with a serious expression, "In reality, it wasn't a good idea to be cooped up in the star domain all day long. If they cultivated there every day, they would become stupid from holding in. So when she said that she let them out to fight or something, they should find it very interesting if they thought about it from other people's perspective. Besides, what kind of joke was this? Sir Jojo wasn't a fool like her husband. How could he foolishly walk out and allow so many zombies to besiege him? A group of people in the star domain would grow moldy if they had nothing better to do. It was simply great to come out and fight. As expected, when Xian and the others heard this, their spirits were instantly roused. fighting, and stretching their limbs are what they liked the most. On the other hand, the Dou family's third miss, Dou Fengqi, who was standing on the side, couldn't help but flash her eyes. She whispered sourly, "The crown princess is truly extravagant." She packed so many helpers in her portable spatial spirit tool. The Dou family's eldest young master, Dou Fengmian, knitted his brows and glared warningly at Dou Fengqi. This third sister had always been a fussy person. Back on Seacombe Planet, she had clashed with the little crown princess several times. Fortunately, she was just a little girl's jealousy, so it wasn't a big deal. Moreover, as she grew older, third sister's temper had slightly curbed. Eldest young Master Dou warned her because he didn't want third sister to make a mistake again. She didn't want third sister to listen to that strange muttering. Today's crown princess is not someone she, a little girl from the Dou family, can make up nonsense at will. Presumably, Dou Fengqi also knew that she had said the wrong thing. As soon as she finished speaking, she tightly shut her mouth. On the other side, Qi Xianxian and the others were released by Arbor. As soon as Mata left the star field, he could not help but rub his fists together. He said with a smile, "Jojo, have you dealt with those outside?" Arbor nodded. "They've all turned into zombies. Hurry up and put on your armor." All right. Everyone took out a complete set of protective armor from their inner worlds and equipped themselves from head to toe. Qi Xianxian wielded her purple light treasured sword, while Ko Hongwen carried his double-headed hammer. The couple stood at the very front and grinned. "Let's go. Clean up those outside." Arbor thought for a moment and could not help but frown slightly. He paused and said, "Pay attention to your own defenses. If you can capture them alive, keep a few to test the reaction of the antidote." However, he didn't know if the second stage of the antidote developed by Huang He and the others would have any major effect on these people who had completely transformed into zombies. After all, strictly speaking, they were already considered dead. The second stage of the antidote, developed by Huang, he was only effective on some injured living bodies. "Don't worry, Jojo." Qi Xianxian raised her small hand, wrapped in armor, and waved at Arbor. Chapter 54:18. When Dou Fengmian and Dou Fenghua saw this, they hurriedly said, "We'll go help too." Then, they turned to look at their third sister, Dou Fengqi, and walked out with Qi Xianxian and the others. Although Dou Fengqi was unwilling, she did not dare to refute her brother's words. She stole a glance at Arbor and followed them out with a drooping mouth. Once they walked out of the door, a gust of wind blew. A rotten stench mixed with the wind blew straight at his face. Through the defensive array, they could see over 1,000 strangely shaped zombies blocking the door. One after another, they dug at the defensive barrier, making continuous thumping sounds. Qi Xianxian hooked her finger at Little Fatty and whispered into his ear. Little Fatty Ko Hongwen nodded and turned to wave at Ma Ta. "Brother, you two go stand guard over there. Brother Duanmu, go to the left. Xianxian, open a door on the defensive barrier later and let them in." When Dou Fengqi was inside, she always wanted to diss Arbor. Now that she was out, she did not need to care about the crown prince anymore. She suddenly mocked. "Open a door? Open what door? This defensive array can't hold on much longer. If you dig another hole in the middle, you won't be able to defeat those zombies one by one. If the defensive barrier collapses when the ones outside swarm in, it will be too late." Qi Xianxian and the others completely ignored her. After discussing among themselves, they nodded and went to stand at their respective positions. When Dou Fengqi saw this, she could not help but make her presence known. "Hey, didn't you hear what I said?" Third sister. Dou Fengmian glared at her warningly. Dou Fengqi was gloomy and shut her mouth in embarrassment. For the crown prince's sake, Big Brother told her to restrain herself from dissing the crown princess. However, these people were merely some of the crown princess friends. What was so bad about dissing them? Big Brother was too careful. In any case, their Dou family was not a small family in the Divine Continent. She was the third miss of the Dou family branch, so why couldn't she say a few words? And what she said wasn't wrong. The defensive barrier was already on the verge of collapsing. If Qi Xianxian and the rest continued to act recklessly, it was only a matter of time before it collapsed. under the pressure of so many corpse puppets, everyone might not be able to bear the consequences. The corners of Do Fengqi's mouth drooped as she looked coldly at the backs of Qi Xianxian and Little Fatty. His eyebrows suddenly twitched. The two of them moved nimbly and jumped forward without saying a word. The double-headed hammer in Little Fatty's hands smashed a hole in the defensive barrier in front of him. Qi Xianxian, who was standing beside Little Fatty, hurriedly threw out a defensive talisman to reinforce the defensive barrier. In the blink of an eye, a zombie bearing its fangs and brandishing its claws jumped into the hole with a bang. Kill! Qi Xianxian raised her hand and commanded. Mata, who was standing on the right, flew forward with a long spear in his hand. With a crash, he sent the corpse puppet's head flying. The degree of perfection of this coordination was just right. It was done in a single breath without any changes in the middle. The second zombie stepped on the corpse of the first zombie and jumped in. Qi Xianxian shouted again, "Kill!" In a matter of minutes, it was finished off by the azure mist sword on the left. Duan Muqing kept his sword and looked at the hole in the defensive barrier expressionlessly. At this moment, 2 to 3 zombie puppets rushed in from the hole. They did not even need Qi Xianxian to give any orders. Chapter 54:19. The 2 young masters from the Do clan twitched their mouths. They hurriedly released 2 wood spirits to bind the corpse puppets together. Everyone raised their weapons and swarmed forward. With a few strikes of their swords, sabers, spears, and hammers, these unlucky corpses were all taken care of. Do Fengqi was dumbstruck. She probably didn't expect these people to be so shameless. They even purposely left a door for the corpse puppets to pass through so that they could swarm over and beat them up. After an hour, they really did take care of several hundred corpse puppets. Duan Muqing took out several cups of spirit tea from his inner world and gave them to his companions to replenish their strength. Glancing at the 2 young masters from the Do clan who worked hard, the Duanmu brothers reluctantly offered them a cup as well. After drinking a cup of spirit tea, Qi Xianxian felt her entire body relax. Her body had mostly recovered. In the past, when she drank this spirit tea, 1 cup was enough to completely recover her energy. However, now that they had all ascended to the deity realm, the spirit tea could not completely replenish their lost divine power in the first place. However, drinking was better than nothing. Once they recovered, everyone felt that they could fight a few hundred more corpse puppets. However, Qi Xianxian scratched her head and glanced outside the door. Am I hallucinating? Why do I feel that those things aren't stupidly squeezing in? It's not a hallucination. After drinking a cup of spirit tea, young Master Do's energy recovered quite well. He instantly looked at the Duanmu brothers gratefully and hurriedly said, "These corpse puppets aren't coming in." Preposterous. Qi Xianxian let the 2 hidden guards clean up the corpse puppets. When she said clean up, she meant to melt or burn those rotting corpses on the spot. Otherwise, with several hundred corpse puppets blocking the door of the defensive barrier, how could they attract other corpse puppets in? However, now that the corpses were properly cleaned up, those corpse puppets outside all hesitated and didn't gather near the door. Instead, they scattered to the side. However, they didn't leave. Instead, they roared at the mayor's residence through the defensive barrier. Arbor and Mo Lien walked out. Seeing that half of the corpse puppets were gone, they nodded and asked, "Did you catch any alive?" Qi Xianxian shook her head. As soon as these things rushed in, they bared their fangs and brandished their claws. It was really unsightly. None of them showed any mercy when they attacked. Do Fengqi suddenly snorted from the side. "Here!" He stretched out his leg and kicked something covered in rotten flesh in front of them. This person's original appearance could not be seen at all. His 4 limbs were tied up with ropes, and he could not walk at all. He could only roll around like a ball. Arbor glanced at Do Fengqi and nodded. He pointed his finger across the air, and the raging flames bombarded the corpse puppet's neck. The corpse puppet roared and opened its mouth wide. Arbor took advantage of this gap and opened the bottle with a finger, pouring half of the second stage antidote into the corpse puppet's mouth. "Illo, illo, illo, illo." The corpse puppet seemed to be in great pain, rolling on the ground and howling. Arbor didn't give him a second glance. He waved his hand at the secret guard beside him. Take him away and watch over him. He reckoned that this antidote would have a little effect on a corpse puppet that had been in the corpse state for a long time. Otherwise, how could he be in so much pain? He hoped that this effect was good. He also hoped that the antidote developed in the third stage would have an obvious effect on people who had turned into corpses. Chapter 54:20. Jojo, Qi Xian said indignantly. Qi Xian said indignantly. I realize that some of these corpse puppets also have brains. Look at those outside. They're blocking the way and won't come in. Qi Xian pointed at half of the zombies scattered far away outside the defensive barrier. Let's charge out and fight. Arbor muttered to herself for a moment before helping them inspect the defensive armor on their bodies. She nodded and said, these zombies must be completely cleaned up. If one were to be released, it would only harm more people outside. The Crown Prince had instructed the hidden guards to do this, so they naturally stepped up their efforts to check if there were any zombies that had charged out of this village. If they weren't careful and zombies broke into their residences, then it would be a very troublesome matter. There were only a few hundred zombies left, so it wasn't a difficult task for everyone. At the young Crown Prince Consort's signal, everyone ran out like a swarm of bees. Do Fengqi harumphed and jumped outside with everyone, following Qi Xian and the others into the zombie horde. Arbor and Mo Lien followed them out, occasionally kicking the zombies that pounced in front of them and sending a beam of divine power over to rescue Do Fengqi, who was besieged by several zombies. He took a leisurely stroll outside the house. The little stoic rubbed her chin. There must be more zombies gathered at the ruined temple. We have to think of a way to deal with them as soon as possible. Otherwise, the sky will be bright if we dawdle. They had to think of a way to eradicate all the zombies around Jiaoguang Base today. Tianyun and the others were truly shameless, releasing so many zombies in the outskirts of the capital all at once. Xiao Mu's small stoic face was cold as she slowly walked through the zombie horde. She abruptly halted her steps and swiftly turned her head. She swiftly sliced open the air in front of her and took out a thunderclap soared from her inner world. Without another word, she slashed at the head of a zombie behind her. Roar! An earth-shaking roar startled Qi Xian and the others, who were fighting fiercely with the zombie horde. He quickly turned his head and saw that His Highness the Crown Prince had already flown up and stood in front of Jojo to block the big-headed corpse puppet's claw. This was truly a big-headed zombie. Its head was the size of a millstone, and its pair of small eyes were squeezed into its face. It was so ugly that it was simply unbearable to look at. Do Fengqi was startled. She turned around and found that the big-headed zombie was originally standing diagonally behind her. If it wasn't for the Crown Princess' sudden attack, the big-headed corpse puppet might have attacked him first. Do Fengqi's face immediately turned pale, and she couldn't help but take a few steps back. I say, how can there be no leader among the zombies? Arbor coldly muttered to himself. He stretched out his hand to touch the lightning on his sword and casually threw it over. The thunderous explosion landed on the big-headed corpse puppet's body. The corpse puppet let out 2 angry roars as it was struck by the lightning bolts. However, it didn't fall and remained standing upright. He suddenly moved. His swift speed was almost comparable to a bolt of lightning. The big-headed zombie's crawling movements didn't resemble that of a human. Instead, it resembled an animal like a leopard. Its 4 limbs were on the ground, and its movements were extremely swift. In the blink of an eye, it arrived in front of Arbor and clawed at her leg. Mo Lien sneered. Without waiting for Arbor's sword to land, a burning black flame landed on the big-headed zombie's claw. With a whoosh, the flame suddenly burst out. Chapter 54:21. The big-headed corpse puppet was suddenly attacked by the black flames. Its entire claw was engulfed by the black flames. It howled and trembled uncontrollably. Arbor looked at him in surprise. Logically speaking, as a walking corpse puppet, it shouldn't be able to feel anything. Therefore, The trembling of his body should be it was instinctively afraid of the purest black, sacred flames in the world. Yin didn't have any intention of talking to it. Her black flames had reached perfection, and every move she made was a death sentence. Zhao Guang didn't know how many corpse puppets had gathered at the ruined temple base. Hopefully, the situation wasn't too bad. As Xiao Mu thought this, she saw Yin draw out a heavy raven moon and send the big-headed zombie's head flying with a swing of his sword. The rest of the corpse puppet's body flickered in and out of existence in the black flames for a while before it finally turned into a pile of ash and disappeared. At the same time, Hades Ba led thousands of secret guards into the thatched forest and gathered near the group. Arbor glanced at them and quickly ordered Qi Xian to take out the protective armor from the storage talisman and distribute them to everyone. This is only a small portion of the corpse puppets. There might be more inside, Yin said softly. With the protective armors on the ship, protect yourselves as much as possible. Give it your all. For the safety of the imperial capital, we must fight to the end. The secret guards raised their arms and roared a few times. Then, they followed the crown prince and crown princess and ran towards the back of the hill outside Malintown. The ruined temple was right in front of them. It was already daybreak. This was also Arbor and Lien's arrangement. They deliberately avoided the dark night and waited at the entrance of the town for the entire night before taking action at dawn. The situation inside the ruined temple base was unknown. They needed to be fully prepared. Protecting the lives of the people was indeed the most important task. However, the thousands of secret guards and soldiers who came with them couldn't lose their lives for nothing. Everyone followed the crown prince and crown princess and ran all the way to the ruined temple at the back of the mountain. They slowly came to a stop a few hundred meters away from the temple. Half of the red sun was shining on the horizon, and a faint red glow of dawn was gradually spreading out over the mountains and plains. In Arbor, Yin led her group of companions and the secret guards to the back of the hill. They looked at the empty and ruined temple in front of the door with solemn expressions. Xiao Mu said hesitantly, "There's actually not a speck of a zombie here." With such an abnormal situation, everyone knew that there was definitely something fishy going on. A gust of cold wind blew in his face, and he felt that the surrounding atmosphere was a little gloomy. Dou Fengqi could not help but raise her hand to rub the tiny goosebumps that appeared on her arm. She forced herself to calm down and said in her heart, "I think there should be something strange about this damned place. It's better to be cautious." Dou Fengmian nodded and turned to look at the crown prince and crown princess. "I'm afraid it's inappropriate for the two of you to rush in like this. What do you think?" Arbor glanced at her husband and even hinted at him with her eyes. Yin couldn't help but laugh. He patted his wife's head in passing and released 2 golems, coldly giving them an order. These 2 golems were Fan Xiuhe and Fan Gu, who had their souls extracted and transformed. Like Lu Yizhi, the 2 of them have been turned into golems by Lien using extreme methods. The more dangerous and difficult the place was, the more they would be forced to go and suffer misfortune. Chapter 54:22. By now, Yin had already ground away the last strand of consciousness that these people had left. Currently, they were wrapped in copper skin and turned into mechanical puppets. Like walking corpses, they only obeyed their master's orders. These 2 mechanical puppets weren't slow, and one of them jumped all the way into the rundown temple. Arbor looked up and asked absent-mindedly, "What happened to Fan Gu's leg?" "Who knows?" Yin also looked indifferent. "She probably hurt herself when I sent them out to do something last time. One idiot. She can't even handle such a small matter." Qi Xian and the rest were a bit puzzled, and they silently glanced at the crown prince. From what they knew, the crown prince had made many mechanical puppets, but he seemed to treat a few of them rather badly. The big treasure he gave Jojo was noisy all day, but the couple didn't seem to dislike it. How would they know that there really was a knack for this? Lu Yizhi and the rest were truly mechanical puppets that had been refined into human puppets. They were neither alive nor dead, and had suffered all kinds of pain and torture until now. Arbor had only asked casually and nodded when he heard the Crown Prince's words. The group quietly waited outside the run-down temple for news. After Fangu and Fan Xioha, the two mechanical puppets, went in, it didn't move at all. Half an hour had passed as the sun rose high in the sky. Yin couldn't help but frown. So useless. Arbor nodded and released several poison-tailed butterflies with a wave of his hand. He let the little butterflies go in to take a look first. They were small and didn't attract too much attention when they flew in from the corners. The main reason was that it was completely empty outside, which was a little surprising. They originally thought that the inside and outside of this rundown temple would be completely surrounded by zombies, but unexpectedly, not a single zombie could be seen. It was indeed very strange. After a moment, Arbor received information from the poison-tailed butterflies. There's no one inside. Arbor turned to look at Yin, who was standing beside him. Fangu and Fan Xioha, those two things are also gone. Two such large mechanical puppets had inexplicably disappeared without a trace. This situation made everyone even more vigilant. What did this mean? This meant that there was definitely a powerful force hidden in this dilapidated temple. The two mechanical puppets were quietly dragged to an unknown place. There was definitely something strange going on in the depths of this dilapidated temple. Arbor glanced at the dilapidated temple and snorted coldly. She exchanged glances with her husband, who turned to look at her. The two of them nodded at the same time. Arbor raised her hand, and 3 spirit stone cannons appeared beside her. A few hidden guards swiftly went up. Under the young Crown Prince Consort's nod, they loaded the spirit stones one by one and pushed the spirit stone cannon 100 meters forward. He suddenly turned the muzzle of the cannon, and after a few rumbling sounds, the entire door of the ruined temple was blasted flat by the spirit stone cannon. The temple door was wide open, and a burst of smoke rose from all directions. The earth and rocks in front of the door had completely collapsed, revealing a large, dark hole. Looking in from here, he could see that the stone floor of the ruined temple had been bombarded by the spirit stone cannons. There were several rows of holes, and there were faint flames floating out from them. Arbor raised her hand and waved it, sweeping away the faint smell of smoke in front of her. Continue. Yin looked at the entrance of the ruined temple and calmly gave the order. Thus, the secret guards once again took out handfuls of spirit stones and threw them in. The muzzle of the cannon was aimed at the earth and brick walls on both sides of the ruined temple. Qi Xian and the others couldn't bear to look at it. Chapter 54:23. This couple was truly the same kind of pit. How could the dilapidated temple, which was already on the verge of collapse, withstand this kind of devastation after several rounds of bombardment from the spirit stone cannons? A loud boom came from afar. The entire dilapidated temple collapsed, raising a cloud of dust and dirt. Sir Jojo expressionlessly watched everything before him. After waiting quietly for a while, the commotion over at the dilapidated temple gradually calmed down. She then pulled along Jojo's lotus and strolled forward. She took out a fan from her inner world and waved it here and there, brushing away the dust in front of her eyes. The little fatty and the others who followed behind her were simply about to die from laughter. Zhaoguang seemed to have been tricked a bit miserably this time. Sir Jojo had sent people to raise their old nest to the ground with the spirit stone cannons. Everyone filed up the dilapidated temple in a single file. Yin suddenly took out his staff from his inner world, and everyone looked at him in bewilderment. They watched as that handsome banished immortal, who shone like the sun, moon, and stars, expressionlessly poked at the pit in front of him with the staff, then poked at the ground in front of him. Everyone, why not? His Highness the Crown Prince was inexplicably down to earth like this. There should be a secret passage here. Yin used the staff to knock on the ground buried by the soil, and a hollow knocking sound came from below. The little stoic said in understanding, they just like to dig rat holes underground. Evidently, this place is no exception. Move away some of this soil and rocks. At the Crown Prince's command, several hidden guards ran forward and pushed away the rubble that filled the ground. They revealed a square cover with a red copper ring in the middle. Prince Emo used the staff to push the ring down and muttered to himself for a moment before saying, "It seems that the real Zhaoguang base should be below here." Fan Xiuhe and Fan Gu, these two mechanical puppets, were most likely dead by now. Arbor glanced at the Crown Prince, and the latter nodded slightly at her. When the two secret guards received the signal from His Highness, they quickly walked forward and activated their defensive spiritual tools. Their expressions were slightly grave. The two of them reached out at the same time, each of them holding the red copper ring and pulling it up with all their might. Chia's soft sound was heard, and a wisp of faint white smoke seemed to float up from the ground. Fortunately, Arbor was already prepared. He sprinkled a handful of powder, and the white mist immediately dissipated. When the cover was completely pulled away, a long and gloomy staircase was revealed. There seemed to be thousands of stone steps that led to the depths of the earth. A putrid smell wafted out from inside, and everyone couldn't help but cover their noses. Do Fengqi's expression became extremely ugly. "It's so smelly, there definitely won't be anything good down there. Fengqi, go back to the Do clan and report this. Ask the patriarch to bring some people over to help." Do Fengyan suddenly turned around and said to her third sister. Do Fengqi hesitated for a moment, "But you guys, take 100 men and guard the entrance." "Yes. The rest of you, follow us down," the Crown Prince said coldly. "Activate your defensive spirit artifacts." The little stoic had just taken a small step when her husband pulled her to his side and held her small hand. "Follow behind me," he whispered softly to her. The little stoic raised her hand and slapped several defensive talismans on him before slapping several on herself. Then, she handed a handful of defensive talismans to the others. "Be careful." Everyone entered in a single file and walked down the stairs. The further down they went, the more suffocating they felt. A putrid smell assailed their noses, and the stench was overwhelming and extremely unpleasant. Chapter 54-24. Xiao Mu and the others hastily and stealthily blocked off their five senses, repelling that suffocating stench. Qi Xianxian subconsciously held onto little Fatty's arm and followed him down a few hundred steps. The group in front of them suddenly stopped. Qi Xianxian and the others immediately prepared themselves for battle. They raised their vigilance and focused their attention on the front. They saw that the stairs were winding down, and there seemed to be no end in sight. However, Arbor stopped and took out a dozen bottles of medicine to give out a round of pills. "The poisonous fog here is thicker. Take the medicine first before going down." Hearing this, everyone nodded and passed the pills one by one. Everyone took an antidote in advance. Then, the group followed Arbor and Mo Lien down the stairs. After about half a quarter of an hour, the group saw various stone sculptures appear at the end of the long staircase. They thought to themselves that they had probably reached the end of the staircase. As expected, when Arbor saw the harpy sculptures that represented the existence of heavenly luck, he knew that they had finally found the proper entrance to the base. Xiao Mu stumbled when she stepped on something round and bulging. She hastily grabbed Mo Lien's arm and steadied herself. The two of them looked down at the same time and saw a pitch-black metal arm scattered on the ground. Mo Lien frowned and looked down. "It's half of Fan Gu's elbow." Arbor raised his delicate eyebrows. It seemed that it was just as Jojo's lotus had predicted. Fan Gu and Fan Xiuhe, these two little puppets, were probably completely done for. What a pity. Sir Jojo smirked mockingly. There were thousands of sufferings in life, and they had not experienced all of them yet. The two of them walked along a stone path that flickered with fire. They saw that there were sculptures of harpies in various poses on both sides of the path. Two half-open stone doors stood in front of them. Mo Lien's footsteps paused as he exchanged glances with his wife beside him. The two of them looked up at the stone doors. There were two neat rows of words carved on them. "If you want to change this world, you have to change yourself first." Little Fatty looked up at the stone carvings and could not help but snort. This leader of heavenly luck is quite arrogant. Every time he opened his mouth, he could change the entire world. It seemed that he was acting like a savior of the world. Arbor was about to step through the stone doors when he suddenly felt a grip on his wrist. He was pulled behind Emolien. At the same time, dozens of dirty zombies suddenly came out of the stone doors and pounced on them without a word. A few of the secret guards leaped up swiftly and blocked the crown prince and his wife's path to face the dozen or so zombies. In the blink of an eye, the two sides were on the verge of fighting. A few of the secret guards were slightly more aggressive. They slammed the corpse puppet against the stone door, causing two dull thuds to ring out. The stone doors suddenly swung open to both sides, as if attracted by a huge force, and heavily stuck to the walls on both sides. Arbor turned his head and looked over. He could not help but be startled. A young man walked out of the stone doors. He had a dignified face, and his face was slightly old-fashioned. There were wrinkles between his eyebrows. It seemed that he had been frowning for a long time. His eyes were grayish-white. When he looked up at people, there was a chilling feeling. Arbor's intuition told him that this person was somewhat familiar. He could not help but be alarmed. It was not his first time dealing with zombies, but the one in front of him seemed to be different from the ones he had seen before. 8 o'clock ended. Chapter 54:25. Qi Xian involuntarily tightened her grip on the purple treasured sword. She was on guard as she stared intently at the person who walked out of the stone door. This ash-colored eyeball was intimidating, so it definitely wasn't a pure object. Little Fatty Ko Hongwon subconsciously walked forward and stood in front of Xian. He sized up this person with his beady black eyes and scratched his head. He looks a bit familiar. He indeed looks a bit familiar, Arbor inwardly thought. However, she couldn't recognize who this person was for the time being. Jojo reflexively looked at her husband for an answer. With her husband's photographic memory, he would definitely know who this person was if he had seen him before. Medicine King Island's young island master, young Master Wei Sui. Mo Yin's expression flickered, and she lowered her head to meet Arbor's eyes. He said softly, "Do you still remember, Jojo? We met him at the palace gates." At that time, this person was misled by Inai Hanji and came to make trouble for you. Later, Jojo testified on the spot that Inai Hanji's master, His Excellency He Won, was killed by her own vicious methods. Wei Sui received 3 lashes of the whip in public and brought Inai Hanji back to Medicine King Island to be punished with the heavenly punishment of destruction. Her husband's memory was truly very good. After Sir Jojo explained the entire sequence of events, the little stoic immediately understood and nodded repeatedly in astonishment. So it's him. No wonder he looked so familiar. He really was an acquaintance. Back then, both husband and wife had a pretty good impression of this young island master of Medicine King Island. Although this young island master indiscriminately brought a group of Medicine King Island's disciples to the palace to make trouble for them, in the end, he was only deceived by Inai Hanji. Afterward, he realized his mistake, apologized, and was even willing to be punished. Most importantly, he even gifted Jojo a 9 abyss spiritual fruit. Currently, this fruit was flourishing in Jojo's portable divine realm. The 9 abyss spiritual fruit was a divine rank medicinal fruit. It was sparkling and translucent like a grape, but its color was light gold. After consuming it for a long period of time, it would greatly increase one's divine power. However, in the eyes of Arbor and his group of foodies, it wasn't important whether or not they could level up. The fruit tasted great. Later on, in midsummer, it would be even more crispy and delicious after being chilled. The water content would be excellent, and it would definitely be a sacred product for cooling down. Right now, Sir Jojo Star Sector had planted a vast expanse of fruit trees. Everyone was in for a treat now that summer had arrived. "Jojo," the little fatty whispered to her, "then are we going to fight or not?" Since he was someone Jojo knew, shouldn't he be more polite to him? However, looking at the current situation, that young island master Wei Sue seemed to have completely turned into a corpse. Arbor pursed his lips and looked at Wei Su, feeling an indescribable pain in his heart. When he first saw this young Master Wei Su, although his face was stiff and unsmiling, at least he was still a living person. He was the young island master of Medicine King Island. Tianyin's hand is really long. Qi Xianxian gritted her teeth. Even the young island master of Medicine King Island couldn't avoid being killed by them. How hateful. Be careful, Mo Yin instructed calmly. She lowered her head to look at Arbor and held his small hand. Jojo, don't worry. Arbor clenched his fist and said in a low voice, I won't be soft-hearted. Right now, in front of them was a rank 3 special class corpse puppet. Chapter 54-26. This was no joke. If he slacked off a little, this special grade zombie might harm his family and friends. No matter how much she sympathized with this young Master Wei Su, she couldn't be merciful to him. Since things had already come to this point, then Wei Su couldn't stay any longer. As the dignified young master of Medicine King Island, if he still had some sanity left at this time, he would certainly not want to become a walking corpse and be willing to become Tian Yun's lackey. Xiao Mu turned her head to meet Mo Yin's eyes before giving him a slight nod. Mo Yin immediately opened her inner world and took out Raven Moon. Without any explanation, she thrust it straight at the neck of the young master of Medicine King Island. Wei Su's figure suddenly disappeared from where he stood. Everyone couldn't help but be stunned. Arbor jerked his head up and looked up. His scalp tingled slightly, and he subconsciously shouted, Disperse. Wei Su had unknowingly moved to the top of the stone wall, and suddenly swooped down with extreme speed, a claw directly tearing at the little fatty's head. Clang! In the blink of an eye, the little fatty took out a black pot lid from his inner world and quickly blocked Wei Su's claw. With Wei Su's claw, a crack appeared in the pot lid. The little fatty was so frightened that he hurriedly opened the pot lid to take a look and angrily cursed. This was a spirit tool he had plundered during his training. Although it was only a pot, it had been with him for a long time. Before he met Jojo and the others, when he was training alone in Shuntian Prefecture, it was all thanks to this pot's accompaniment. But now, this pot's lid had cracked just like that, and it was even torn apart by that rank 3 zombie's claw. His heart ached for the little fatty. At that time, Mo Yin's crisscrossing sword energy had already reached Wei Su. When Wei Su's figure disappeared again, Arbor pursed his lips and immediately used the strand of time energy stored in his body. Wei Su's figure that was just about to disappear suddenly paused in the air for a few seconds, until that sword chi ruthlessly hit his body. Wei Su's entire body was thrown out, and he slammed hard into the stone door behind him. Only then did he realize that he had been hit hard by someone. Wei Su crawled up from the ground with difficulty. Her grayish-white eyes looked in the direction of Arbor and Mo Yin with slight confusion. She subconsciously took a few steps back. Mo Yin whispered to Arbor, he may still have a little bit of consciousness left. However, this weak consciousness was no longer of any use to Wei Su herself. Most of his mind had already been controlled, and his entire mind was probably in a muddled state right now. Arbor clenched his fists tightly, pursed his lips, and coldly looked at Wei Su, who was struggling to get up from the ground. Out of instinct, Wei Su felt that the 2 people in front of him were not to be trifled with. He had no idea what had just happened. Actually, Jojo had used that bit of time energy to slow down time for a few seconds. And it was during this period of delay that Crown Prince Mo cooperated exceptionally well, swiftly sending Wei Su flying with a hack. He had solved the little fatty's predicament, and also struck Wei Su hard. However, the young island master no longer felt any pain. After he got up from the ground in a daze, he raised his hand to support his broken arm and straightened it. Mo Yin couldn't help but narrow her eyes and look Wei Su up and down. She whispered to Arbor, be careful. Chapter 54-27. Looks like this zombie puppet's level might have broken through to the godly realm, Mo Yin said with a serious expression. Arbor nodded with a stoic expression. This zombie puppet can actually teleport. It's probably a new skill it obtained after becoming a zombie. Although the range of each teleport was not large, it was fast and could be used multiple times. At least from Arbor's point of view, this special rank 3 zombie puppet was comparable to a Mystique Venerable Realm expert in terms of movement and speed. Wei Su's cultivation level was definitely not low when he was alive. After becoming a zombie and going through multiple transformations, his current strength was not to be underestimated. The underground passage was narrow, so Arbor naturally could not use the Spirit Stone Cannon to bombard it. If the passage collapsed, he and JoJo's Lotus would have to eat a mouthful of dust. Just thinking about it was annoying. He's trying to run. The little fatty with a bowl cut suddenly shouted as he followed behind the two of them. Lu Yu and the others looked at him and could not help but facepalm. This guy had an iron pot lid on his head, which made him look rather comical. As soon as the little fatty finished speaking, Yin grabbed Arbor's hand and ran toward the stone door. When the others saw this, they hurriedly followed and rushed into the stone door. This young island master probably left some brains. Qi Xian ran with the others and could not help but say, "Look at him! Look at him! He seems to be afraid of the Crown Prince and JoJo. He's running away." Everyone wanted to laugh when they heard this. However, Xian's narration was quite vivid. The zombie puppet was running away. It ran in a crooked manner as if it was in a hurry. It looked like it really wanted to get rid of Yin and JoJo as soon as possible. Unfortunately, those two were very difficult to deal with. They were the ones who tricked others all day long and were never tricked by others. It would be extremely difficult for the corpse puppet to break free from the two of them. "Husband, quick, use the spirit locking rope." Her husband had a spirit locking rope in his hand, so no one could escape. Her husband had taken it back from the 17th floor of the Tower of Punishment. After he had improved it many times, the current God locking rope could probably lock up anyone below the transcendent God realm. Hearing this, Yin hurriedly took out a black iron chain from her inner world and threw it out without saying a word. The chain was originally only the size of a palm, but after it was flung away by Yin, it extended for about 100 meters with a whoosh. Like a lasso, it wrapped around Wei Su tightly in an instant. The pitiful Wei Su had been running forward when this ornament suddenly appeared on his neck. His body was dragged forward and his head smashed onto the ground, falling down. Arbor quickly stepped forward and added 10 gravity talismans to the corpse puppet without saying a word. Everyone watched as the zombie puppet, which had just gotten up, fell head first onto the ground with a thud. Arbor heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly said to the secret guard behind him, "Tie it up and bring it back." She wanted to see if capturing Wei Su, a rank 3 special class zombie, would incur the wrath of the entire Tianyan Empire. The more they captured, the better. When the time came, they would deal with all these high-level zombies and see if they could extract anything useful from them to speed up the production of the antidote. Wei Su was completely incurable now, but perhaps in the near future, they would be able to save more Wei Su. Arbor clenched his fists and took a few steps forward. At this time, the group had already entered the stone door. Chapter 54:28. Inside and outside the door was a completely different world. If the stench from outside was said to be nauseating, then inside the stone door was the long-awaited hell on Earth. Cages were placed on the wall, and each cage held 7 to 8 people. Some of the cages were hung high on the dome, and most of them were hung on the wall. In a large space, there were 20 to 30 cages, and hundreds of people were imprisoned here. Some were missing arms and legs, and some were on the verge of death. Some were old and clumsy, and their eyes were cloudy. Young people with drooping heads and lifeless bodies could be found everywhere. Arbor and the others looked around, and couldn't help but be secretly shocked. Qi Xian held the little fatty's arm tightly and followed him a few steps forward. She couldn't help but feel a little panicked. These people, Arbor's face was calm, and he reached out to release the old mayor. He said in a low voice, "Uncle, go up and identify them." The old mayor was already stunned by the scene in front of him. He shakily reached out and called out the names of the cages one by one. For a moment, he beat his chest and stamped his feet, and tears flowed down his old face. It seemed that the people in prison here were all Mausoleum Town residents who had recently been absorbed into the bright light and were undergoing continuous transformation. Arbor sighed slightly, and he felt a little melancholy in his heart. If these people could be a little more vigilant and be a little more vigilant, perhaps the outcome wouldn't be like this. How could there be such a good thing in this world? The bright light took advantage of everyone's fear and used a holy fruit to deceive them into joining the bright light. Unfortunately, they didn't use their brains to think carefully. Even if the bright light really had holy fruits, would the number of holy fruits be enough for them to use? Would they be able to afford the cost of using the holy fruit? The old mayor suddenly fell to the ground and said with a mournful face, "Crown Princess, can they be saved?" Arbor said with a heavy heart, "It's not clear yet. We need to let people check one by one and know. If they haven't completely turned into corpses, perhaps there is still a way to save them." The old mayor sat on the ground in a daze, and 2 lines of old tears flowed down his face. Mausoleum Town had more than 100 families, and everyone was very familiar with each other. There were more than 100 families in the town, and most of them were related by blood. Now, seeing all his relatives and friends become like this, the old mayor was filled with sorrow. Mata stepped forward and patted the old mayor's back. "Old man, let me help you sit over there for a while." The old man had suffered such a huge blow that his mood was on a roller coaster ride. He was afraid that he would pass out at any time. Mata helped him to a clean place to sit down. Arbor raised his hand and called several shadow guards over, whispering a few words in their ears. She turned to Mo Lien and said, "I'll let Huang He and the others take over here. See if you can help them." Mo Lien nodded. She was also in a bad mood. She pulled Arbor and walked towards Wei Su, who had fallen to the ground and was restrained by the spirit sealing rope. At this moment, Wei Su was tightly bound by the god sealing rope and was struggling with all his might. Seeing the 2 fiends walking over, Wei Su roared furiously and struggled against the god-locking rope that bound him. However, the god-locking rope could be big or small, loose or tight. The more he made a fuss, the more it wrapped around him. Wei Su shook his head and roared twice, glaring at the 2 of them fiercely. That pair of gray, lifeless eyes stared unblinkingly at the husband and wife. Chapter 54:29. A hint of anger flashed through Mo Lien's eyes. Look, these people who used to live normal lives were now ruined by Tianyin. Wei Su was like this, and so were all the townspeople of Malintown. Just how many people was Tianyin going to harm before they were willing to give up? Roar! Wei Su let out a deep roar from the depths of his throat, and his limbs suddenly contracted. The god-locking rope also suddenly contracted around his body. Arbor raised his eyebrows slightly and stared at Wei Su's sudden bone-shrinking appearance. He hooked a stream of water spirit energy between his fingers. Could it be that the young island master of Medicine King Island also obtained a special ability before he turned into a corpse? Something like a bone-shrinking skill? She suddenly released a strong stream of water spirit energy towards the person in front of her. In the blink of an eye, Wei Su suddenly jumped up from the ground. He couldn't get rid of the god-locking rope binding his body. After all, the god-locking rope was a divine weapon made by Mo Lien. It could be long or short, big or small. No matter how his bones contracted, the god-locking rope couldn't possibly let him escape without Jojo's Lotus Divine sense undoing it. However, Wei Su's current appearance was indeed a little strange. Although his body was bound by the god-locking rope, his hands became longer and turned outwards under the chains. His 2 deformed hands grabbed towards Arbor's neck. The water spirit that Xiao Mu released was struck by the fire spirit that Wei Su flicked out, and the 2 spirits formed a powerful current in midair. Then they separated upon contact, flickering and extinguishing like fireworks. Mo Lien frowned slightly. She flashed in front of Jojo and used her sword to knock away the deformed and elongated left hand that was rushing towards Jojo. Looking at Wei Su's left hand now, it was completely different from a normal human's hand. The collision just now was like hitting an iron plate. It was so solid that it was surprising. Yin couldn't help but frown again and glanced coldly in Wei Su's direction. This Wei Su, after turning into a corpse, could still use the fire spirit box. It was indeed unexpected. Arbor also noticed this. Therefore, a rank 3 special zombie puppet was completely different from other zombie puppets. It was probably close to becoming a perfect zombie. Therefore, it was a little difficult to deal with it. Arbor tossed over several binding talismans. The light of the talismans flowed and formed a binding talisman array around the corpse puppet, firmly fixing it within. At the same time, Yin flicked his wrist and wrapped the spirit-locking rope around his 2 arms. As such, the ends of the 3 god-locking ropes were held in place by the 3 young hidden guards. Even though Wei Su had immense strength after his mutation, he was still like a trapped beast, completely unable to move. Wei Su kept struggling and twisting his body, howling and screaming. The old mayor, who was sitting paralyzed on the side, had long been frightened by the scene in front of him. He couldn't even speak. This was simply too terrifying. Who would have thought that these ignorant villagers would actually change into such a terrifying monster after joining Zhaoguang? His whole body trembled slightly, and he couldn't help but shrink back. Seeing this, Mata turned around and comforted him. "Don't be afraid, old man. This corpse puppet is already under control. It won't jump out to harm people again." The old mayor nodded fearfully and wiped away the tears in his eyes. He sat there absent-mindedly, staring blankly at the corpses of the townsfolk locked in the earth cage. With a glance, he discovered that his daughter-in-law and 2 nephews were also locked in the cage. Chapter 54:30. Thinking of his young grandchildren asking about their mother's whereabouts, the old mayor couldn't help but cry. When his daughter-in-law went to Zhaoguang to ask for holy water, they all tacitly agreed. He didn't expect that his stupidity would harm his family and his 2 children, causing them to lose their mother's care. On the other side, when Huang He rushed over with the members of the Heavenly Pill Association, it was already half an hour later. This stone room had been slightly cleaned by the secret guards. They took down all the cages hanging on the wall. Now, the 20 to 30 cages were neatly placed in the stone room. The surroundings were illuminated by several fist-sized luminous pearls, making it as bright as day. Xiaomu walked up to greet Huang He and the others. She then pointed at Wei Su, who was bound by the 3 spirit sealing ropes. "It's a special class rank 3 zombie. We have already subdued him. Is Mr. Su here?" A middle-aged man quickly walked forward and bowed. "Greetings, Crown Princess." "Greetings, Your Highness." "Mr. Su, you don't have to be so polite." Arbor nodded slightly at him, then took out a box from his inner world and handed it to him. "I heard that you're already in the middle of the 3rd stage of the antidote experiment. I, the Crown Princess, have created a kind of recovery potion here. I wonder if I can help you." In fact, this potion was created by the little Crown Princess, grinding a holy fruit and adding a few herbs to dilute it. The little tree had already borne more than a dozen holy fruits. Although it was many times faster than in the past, the speed of the results was many times faster. However, compared to the many zombies in the world, a mere dozen holy fruits really couldn't help much. Moreover, Lord Jojo had her own selfish motives. She couldn't use all kinds of methods to hasten the growth of the little tree that had accompanied her until now. She also couldn't selflessly contribute all the holy fruits to the world without reservation. There were only a dozen holy fruits in total. At a critical moment, one could save a life. Naturally, she still wanted to use it for her friends and comrades. She could only say that she would do her best to help Fairy Huang He, Mr. Su, and the others make the antidote. This kind of diluted recovery liquid may be of great help to Mr. Su and the others in refining the 3-stage detoxification liquid in the future. However, if it wasn't of much help, she could only help and obtain another saint fruit to test the medicinal liquid. Mr. Su couldn't hide his excitement. He reached out and took the box of medicine from the little crown princess. Opening the box, he saw 2 neat rows of small potion bottles stacked neatly inside the box. There were a total of 20 bottles. Mr. Su quickly nodded and said, "Crown Princess, don't worry. I will do my best to carry out the 3rd stage of the antidote test with Fairy Huang as soon as possible." Arbor nodded in relief. She trusted Mr. Su. After all, he was someone that JoJo's Lotus valued. Not only was he smart and courageous, he was also proficient in the art of formations, mechanisms, elixirs, and talismans. He was not an ordinary person. Fairy Yellow Crane took a step forward and looked at the surroundings. Her expression was serious. "Jojo, these people? There were actually 200 people here, and from the looks of it, they had all been passively transformed. The auras on these people were faintly discernible, and there was no sign of life." Emol Yin waved her hand and released the townsfolk of Maolin Town from the storage talisman. Once everyone came out, they quickly shrank in a corner and saw the scene in front of them clearly. Chapter 54:31. They wailed and wailed, looking like they wanted to approach the wooden cages but did not dare to. Emol Yin said indifferently, "You can go over and say your goodbyes. At least 90% of the people here can't be saved." He had only glanced at them indifferently. More than 90% of them were corpses. Only about 10% of them seemed to have the aura of living people. It was unknown if the antidote could pull them back. As soon as the Crown Prince said that, the townsfolk stumbled over and cried out in pain through the wooden cages. The scene of life and death parting made one's heart ache a little. Even though Arbor was used to such scenes, he still found it hard to bear. He turned around and sighed softly. Fairy Yellow He and company could not help but sigh as well. They looked sympathetically at the wailing crowd. If Tianyin had not been so ruthless and caused so much trouble, how could these townsfolk have lost so many of their loved ones in one night? Tianyin is too hateful. A young female alchemist clenched her fists in anger and could not help but shout. Huang He sighed and nodded slightly at a man beside him. "Are the carriages and horses ready? Move these cages onto the carriage and send them back to our experimental base first." Fairy Yellow He and Mr. Su had set up an antidote experimental base in the outskirts of Sovereign Capital. Now, all the things they talked about were related to that place. More than 90% of the Heavenly Pill firm's members had gone to the base in the outskirts. Only 10% of the alchemists remained in the city to continue running the Heavenly Pill firm. Although Yellow He sympathized with the townsfolk who were separated by life and death, he still had to finish what he had to do as soon as possible. If he could extract the corpse poison from these people as soon as possible, he could analyze it faster. It would further advance the development of the antidote. If these corpse puppets were to be graded, the corpse poison content of the special class corpse puppets was the highest. Just a casual touch could turn a person into a corpse in a matter of minutes. Under the persuasion of Yellow He and Mr. Su, the townsfolk finally walked out of the stone door while grieving and supporting each other. They watched as the wooden cages were moved out and placed on the carriage. The sound of the carriage wheels gradually faded into the distance. The townspeople of Maolin Town, from top to bottom, all had extremely blurry eyes. They knew very well that they would never see each other again after today's parting. Perhaps a few of them could be saved, but that was only a sliver of hope. His return was uncertain and difficult to find. Sir Jojo stood there with a cold expression as he watched the trussed-up Wei Su leave. He even ordered 10 hidden guards to follow him. After all, even though Wei Su had been subdued, his strength still remained. The safety of the people in the Heavenly Pill firm naturally had to be ensured. Emol Yin saw her solemn expression and hurriedly walked up to her. She gently tugged at her little hand. "Jojo, don't be sad, okay? Everything will slowly get better. After we deal with the matters here, we will meet up with Duan Yu and the rest." At present, Duan Yu had already led his men to the vicinity of the kingdom of Qingzhou. According to his message, he suspected that the headquarters of the Heavenly Fate organization was most likely in Qingzhou. But that was to be expected. Qingzhou was located outside of Song Province and Ming Province, so it had always abided by the law and paid tribute every year. If it weren't for the sudden news of the Heavenly Fate organization being conquered, no one would set their sights on such a small kingdom. Chapter 5432. However, Qingzhou was only so big. Could it be that Tianyun had built another underground base in Qingzhou? That made sense. After all, it was a method that Tianyun, this group of people who love to dig rat holes, would often use. If someone were to come and tell him that the entire underground area of Qingzhou had been requisitioned by Tianyun's people and built into an underground palace, he would be shocked. Emolian really wouldn't feel the slightest bit surprised. From the Crown Prince's point of view, the way Tianyun and his people did things was just that standard. Arbor took a deep breath and turned to meet the Crown Prince's eyes. His expression couldn't help but be a bit weary. Let's go back. Sapling said earlier that he didn't sense any information from the fragment. I suspect that the last fragment should have been moved away by someone. Since Zhao Guang was Tianyun's lackey, then she definitely had reason to suspect that this Holywood fragment might be a pretense that family head Qin used to tease her. Now, it was very likely that the fragment had been taken back by family head Qin, so this place couldn't be found at all. The fragment might still be in family head Qin's hands. Thinking about it, such an important thing couldn't just be thrown to Mu Jingfeng's group. Family head Qin would definitely firmly grasp it in his hands. Jojo was very displeased that they couldn't find Qiuqiu's last fragment. His head drooped listlessly, and he was a bit unhappy to speak. Emolian couldn't help but laugh when she saw this. She raised a hand to rub his head and softly said, "All right, don't be uncomfortable. Qiuqiu's fragment naturally belongs to our Jojo. It will roll back sooner or later." Arbor thought that was true. The Holywood had a spirit, even if it was just a small fragment. It must also want to return to its master's side as soon as possible. Jojo, let's go back to the city first. This place was filled with the stench of blood, and it was truly nauseating. Needless to say, Arbor didn't want to stay here for a long time. Hearing this, he nodded at Emolian, and she reached out to lead him up the stone steps. When the group exited the underground passage and finally returned to the surface, they couldn't help but exhale. Everyone couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. They felt that the unpleasant smell of blood that lingered in their noses had finally faded a lot. Arbor recalled Qi, Xian, and the rest, and turned to look at the three people from the Dou clan. These three people had helped them quite a bit along the way. Even Dou Fengqi, who is usually very annoying, seemed to be much more responsible in front of an extreme organization like Tianyun. Prince Mo expressed his gratitude, causing the Dou brothers to feel somewhat fearful. After all, with His Highness's current status, there was no need for him to be so courteous with them. After the three Dou clan members left, Mo Lian summoned Little Seven and carried Arbor onto the dragon's back, flying towards the inner city. In the blink of an eye, he had arrived at the Eastern Palace. The two of them were preparing to return to the palace hand in hand to wash up and catch up on sleep. Hu De Quan, eunuch who had been waiting for a long time, ran over with a bitter face. With a round and fat face, he smiled and said to the two of them, "Your Highness Crown Prince, Crown Princess, this old servant has the Empress instructions. If the two of you return, please make a trip to Madame Goen's residence." The two of them looked at each other in dismay. What happened? Hu De Quan's face was full of smiles. He didn't dare to offend this troublesome couple in front of him at all. This servant heard that Madame Goen was assassinated. Chapter 5433. The young couple looked at each other and saw a trace of disapproval in each other's eyes. Hu De Quan's heart couldn't help but beat like a drum when he saw that the two didn't speak. Eunuch Hu stealthily glanced at the two little fiends and said in a low voice with an obscure expression, "Your Highness, Crown Princess, if the two of you feel a bit tired and want to rest a bit before going, that's fine. This old servant can wait outside the door." Eunuch Hu wanted to burst into tears. Why did His Majesty and Her Majesty keep having him provoke these two little fiends? Couldn't they send someone else? Arbor cast him a glance, a bit perplexed as to why this old eunuch's expression was so rich. The little stoic said with a stiff expression, "Lead the way." Hu Dequan was taken aback, but he quickly agreed and repeatedly said okay. He hastily turned around and hurriedly walked outside while shouting, "Why aren't you quickly preparing the carriage? It's freezing outside, so add a few hand warmers inside the carriage." The little stoic crown princess didn't have much of an expression as she was led out of the Eastern Palace's main entrance by Prince Imo. When they boarded the carriage, the little stoic asked icily, "Is it your emperor who suspects that the crown prince and I killed that madam of the Ministry of National Security overnight?" Hu Dequan almost fell head first on the ground. He naturally didn't dare to reply and hastily shook his head while saying, "You're wrongly accusing me, crown princess. His Majesty treats the two of you with fatherly love, so he definitely wouldn't suspect you." As soon as he finished speaking, he saw the crown prince and crown princess both staring at him expressionlessly. Hu Dequan almost bit his own tongue, and he wanted to cry even more, but had no tears. The emperor always made things difficult for him. He always threw him, a lackey, into the crevice and had difficulty breathing to survive. It was truly very sullen for him to always be pressured by the crown prince and crown princess and live a tight life. Hu Dequan saw that the two of them didn't say anything else. After they boarded the carriage and lowered the curtains, the old eunuch finally raised his sleeve to wipe the cold sweat on his forehead as a chill ran down his spine. Oh my God, this really made people feel a little scared. This crown princess didn't look like she had much to say on a normal day, but it couldn't be helped that she was more intelligent than others. Once he opened his mouth, everything he said was accurate. Wasn't it because the great emperor courted death by thinking that the death of the madam of the Goen family had something to do with this bastard couple? Speaking of which, Hu Dequan also believed that the death of Madame Goen might be related to the crown prince and his wife. After all, the young crown princess and Madame Goen had a deep grudge against each other. Although their relationship had eased a lot recently, it was only because Madame Goen did not seek trouble with the crown princess. But what if the madam of the National Security Agency returned to her old ways and made the little crown princess unhappy again? No one knew if something else had happened between the two of them. Speaking of which, after the crown princess returned from the River of Forgetfulness, it seemed that her days were not peaceful. Every day was extremely thrilling. Previously, the City of Shadows had just attacked them, but now they had destroyed the entire City of Shadows with the power of lightning. Sometimes Tianyin would make a move, and sometimes the Qingzhou kingdom would fall. Previously, the people of Zhaowang were about to do something in the imperial capital, but later they were arrested and imprisoned by the crown princess. The imperial court raided one house after another every 2 or 3 days, causing everyone to be in a state of panic. Everyone looked at the crown prince as if he was a fiend. Their days were miserable. Chapter 5434. Things seemed to have calmed down quite a bit recently, but Madame Goen had suddenly died in her residence. Strange things were happening every day. As a servant, he couldn't help but be on tenterhooks as he sat in the depths of the palace. It was hard to say when something would happen in the depths of the palace. Eunuch who walked in front of the carriage and stole glances at the carriage through the curtain from time to time. Although he knew that he couldn't see the movements of the two people in the carriage, Eunuch who couldn't help but glance in their direction. Madame Goen's residence wasn't in a remote area. After passing through Changle Street and detouring to the neighboring street, they arrived at their destination in no time. The junior eunuchs rushed forward to help the crown princess. But the young crown princess waved her hand and leaped to the ground, walking towards the main entrance. She didn't need anyone to help her. It wasn't as if she was missing an arm or a leg. Emolien caught up with her in amusement and asked in a low voice, "Jojo, are you angry?" "Humph." The young crown princess rolled her eyes and complained softly, "When something happened, your father's first instinct was that it was us who did it. Why do you think he would think that? The crown prince had a profound expression on his face. He rubbed his chin and nodded, saying, maybe he thinks that Goen has an unsettled feud with us. Arbor wagged a finger at him. That's not the reason. It's your father who thinks that we're scammers. Arbor pointed out without batting an eyelid. It's not the first time he thinks that we're scammers. Whenever there's a slight disturbance, he'll easily link it to us. Emolien. His wife's words seemed to make sense. The crown prince pursed his lips and reached out to hold his wife's small hand, muttering, how are we scammers? Most of the time, we're very reasonable with people. Arbor nodded in agreement. That's right, we've never scammed people. Eunuch who had followed the two through the door, almost tripped over the high threshold. He really wanted to ask the two nobles in front of him. You two have probably long forgotten about all the things that happened in the past, right? Hand in hand, the young couple stepped through the door and were led to the central courtyard by the servants. After entering the arch of hanging flowers, they saw a corpse covered in a white cloth lying at the bottom of the long corridor. Bai Wuxiao was leading the head palace maid, Pearl, and the others to sit in the small pavilion opposite. When she saw the two of them approaching from afar, she stood up and walked down from the small pavilion. She smiled and greeted them. Emolien, Jojo, you're here. Come and help Imperial Mother take a look. This Goen's death is a bit strange. Nyang Nyang. Jinju hurriedly went forward and reminded her in a small voice. The Empress suddenly thought of something and hurriedly pulled Arbor's hand. Goen died in an undignified manner. His entire body is somewhat. The Empress thought for a long time and finally told the truth. My whole body was cut up. If you don't like it, you don't have to look at it. Arbor, on the other hand, became curious after hearing the Empress's explanation. Goen's wife was actually so pitiful. Not only was she assassinated in her residence, but her entire body was also cut up. How much hatred and resentment must there be to make Her Majesty so embarrassed to talk about it? Arbor's curiosity was piqued. He held the Empress's hand and said, Imperial Mother, Jojo is not afraid. Bai Wuxiao smiled and nodded repeatedly. He had to mentally prepare his daughter-in-law first. Chapter 54:35. Otherwise, when she lifted the white cloth and saw Goen's appearance, she would be frightened. From the beginning to the end, Empress Bai had never considered whether she would scare her son. In her opinion, her son was a man. If he couldn't even see this little bit of blood, how could he protect his wife and children in the future? The Empress asked someone to remove the white cloth covering Goen's body. The young couple took a look and couldn't help but gasp. The person who came was really good. It was rare for them to see such a badly mutilated corpse. Goen's body was really incomplete from top to bottom. Especially that face. It could almost give people nightmares. The face in front of them couldn't see Goen's original appearance at all. His entire face had been dug out, leaving behind only a few terrifying holes. Arbor couldn't bear to look and turned his eyes away. He thought to himself, who did Goen provoke? Even after her death, she can't be left in peace. Sigh. Bai Wuxiao sighed and said in a low voice, and this is after cleaning. You didn't see it at first. Bai Wuxiao shook his head and said, her whole body is bloody. There's a piece missing from her body. It's fine if she's missing an arm or a leg. Her face has been dug out like this. If it weren't for a few bold women helping to clean it up, the corpse would be even more incomplete. That person must have a lot of hatred for her. Not only did she dig out her eyes, but she also made her unable to see in the netherworld. She also cut off her ears and nose, making her lose her 5 senses. In the end, she even sealed her mouth with a ball of mud. When Bai Wuxiao said this, he couldn't help but sigh faintly. This is to make Goen unable to reason even if she goes to the netherworld and sees the king of hell. The little crown princess couldn't help but raise her eyebrows and say something conscientious. There's no such thing as hatred for no reason in this world. There's cause and effect first. Madam can't blame others for her current state. The corners of Prince Mo's lips curled up slightly. He knew that his little wife would scold anyone she saw, even if it was her mother, who she had a good relationship with. As a little wife who had a bottom line of justice in her heart, She would side with reason and not family. Bai Wuxiao was stunned. He secretly glanced at his daughter-in-law's expressionless face and secretly found it funny. She quickly nodded and followed Jojo's words. It's not that I sympathize with the National Security Agency. I'm just a little sad. After all, ever since Guan became her father's adopted daughter, she had Glory City to take care of her. Her days have been pretty good. Then, Bai Wuxiao became the Empress of Shenzhou. She became the Empress's sworn sister openly and was given the title of Madam of the National Security Agency. She lived a carefree life like a fairy. As long as she didn't cause too much trouble, she would be able to live a carefree life without worrying about food and clothing for the rest of her life. Your Highness, a hidden guard hurriedly ran over and whispered a few words. Bai Wuxiao's expression changed slightly. He frowned and asked, "How many people?" "I estimate that there are more than 10 of them. They're all locked up in the cellar at the back. Some of them look like they're about to die." Empress Bai coughed softly and subconsciously glanced at her daughter-in-law. Seeing the little fellow's expressionless face, his heart began to beat faster for no reason. Cough. Then why hasn't anyone mentioned this before? Goen is really outrageous. Empress Bai said, "Release them first, then pacify them properly." The little expressionless had already heard it clearly. She said expressionlessly, "She kidnapped a man and hid him at home." Chapter 5436. Others must also have nowhere to seek redress for their grievances. For relatives like this who bully others, I would have dealt with them 800 years ago. It was impossible to allow them to jump up and down until now. Arbor continued coldly. This person is so disgusting. She should be punished. The Crown Prince hurriedly nodded. Yes. Families have family rules, and countries have national laws. Goen arbitrarily detained people in the cellar at home, which is a violation of national laws and must be severely punished. White Empress. The Empress now felt a little empathetic and understood His Majesty's feelings. The son was completely from the wife's country, and whatever the wife said was right. This was really worrying. Goen was already dead. How could they punish her? We must seize Goen's title and confiscate all her assets. The Crown Prince's handsome face was cold as he said righteously, "Part of it will go to the national treasury. Part of it will go to the victim's family. Comfort the victim's family." When a young Crown Prince Consort heard this, she nodded in full agreement. Her small face was taut. The Crown Prince is extremely right. Mother, you mustn't shield them for the sake of Glory City's and grandfather's face, unable to differentiate right from wrong. White Empress. Actually, it's not that serious. The old steward of Goen's residence couldn't help but wipe the cold sweat off his forehead. He knelt on the ground and cried out, "Her Majesty is Madam's foster sister and has accompanied Madam for decades." Hearing this, the little Crown Princess was furious. "You're still playing the sympathy card at this time." The old steward hurriedly cried out miserably, "But Madam is now dead, and died in such an undignified manner. If this matter is made public, first, it will smear the royal family's face, and second, it will be hard to explain to the old city lord." The little Crown Princess said coldly, "This is what you get for doing wrong. She only has herself to blame, so don't blame the heavens for being blind. If everyone is like her, relying on His Majesty and the Empress's power to snatch men and women from the common people, then how will the common people live? Will they still be able to live in peace? A man can't stand without integrity, and a country can't stand without integrity. If I were mother, I would throw this person to the city gate and whip her corpse for 3 days as a warning." The Empress suddenly widened her eyes. She now firmly believed His Majesty's words. No wonder His Majesty had a headache every time he saw his daughter-in-law. She was really a troublesome little girl. "If anyone dares to use my name to do evil deeds outside, I will punish them and make sure that their entire family will have to bear the consequences. Let them know that it's not easy to be my relative." Crown Prince was speechless. The Empress, everyone was speechless. It was true. Being a relative of the little Crown Princess was never easy. Everyone knew that. Jojo. Empress Bai stuttered. The National Security Agency has indeed done wrong. But, but now, she has only herself to blame for her own death. If we throw the corpse out and whip it, it's not very respectful to the corpse. Furthermore, Glory City would lose face. Prince Mo's mouth twitched. See, Imperial Mother is stuttering now. She's regretting it now. Previously, she had seriously called the husband and wife over to see if they had anything to do with this matter. She's unlucky. Empress Bai was extremely regretful. She hurriedly blinked her eyes and said, "How about this? We'll do as the Crown Prince said, take away her title, and move her out of the capital for burial. What do you think?" Chapter 5437. Imperial Mother. Get someone to properly apologize to the families of the victims. Properly compensate them. Arbor looked deeply at the Empress. There are many things that cannot be compensated. The harm they suffered, the loss of dignity, these things cannot be compensated at all. Actually, people in high positions could not understand the suffering of the world at all. They were born with pride, coldness, and indifference. For example, the Empress and even Jojo's Lotus, in reality, they could not truly understand the feeling of being locked up in a dark cellar, unable to cry out for help. Only those who had truly experienced it could clearly understand that feeling of despair, as well as the feeling of losing their dignity bit by bit. She did not blame them, because no one could understand it all. From their point of view, those beautiful young men who had been imprisoned in the cellar had indeed suffered a little. But now that they had been rescued, all they needed to do was to compensate them. Generous compensation would make their lives easier in the future, and that would be a great favor from the imperial family. But in reality, once that kind of terrible damage was done, it was impossible to erase the psychological shadow. The Crown Prince was used to looking at his wife's expression. At this time, when he saw her depressed expression, his heart suddenly thumped. He quickly stepped forward to grab Arbor's little hand and turned to the Empress to say in a low voice, "Mother, the National Security Agency has simply disgraced you. Do you still want to protect her? It should be as Jojo said, throw her at the city gate and flog her for 3 days as a warning to others. In the future, let all the relatives of the imperial family be good people and do not follow the example of the National Security Agency. This Crown Prince will not be merciful to any of them. What uncles, aunts, and concubines? As long as they dare to violate the laws of the country, oppress the common people, and fish in the countryside, they will all die. They must die." The Empress, "Son, you've fallen too quickly. Just now, you said that you would seize the title of the National Security Agency and confiscate all the family assets, but you did not say that you would further flog the corpse. Who would have thought that in the next second, you would change your mind and support your wife's idea of flogging the corpse? For your wife, you really don't care about anything else. You can even raise your eyebrows at your mother? What's the point of me raising you?" On the carriage back to the Eastern Palace, Missouri Lien looked at his wife sitting there listlessly without saying anything. His heart couldn't help but beat like a drum. He approached her and pulled her into his embrace, repeatedly calling out, "Chow chow, chow chow. Don't be angry, okay?" "Why would I be angry?" Arbor glanced at him and said in a mocking tone, "You people are born noble. How could you know how difficult life is? Compensation, compensation, compensation. The shattered dignity, the lost good times. Could anything be compensated? What do they know about being locked up in a cellar where the sun couldn't shine on them?" Emolien's heart was beating wildly. He quickly hugged her and cried out, Jojo, you can't vent your anger on your husband. Your husband and I are on the same side. We are one. I will support you unconditionally. I will support you no matter what you do. Don't worry. In the future, if any of our relatives dare to step on my nose and do evil outside, no matter if they are uncles or aunts, this Crown Prince will not recognize them. You don't need to compromise on everything. Arbor impatiently threw away his hand. You are the Crown Prince. You were born noble. Your mother is the Empress, and your father is the Emperor. Chapter 5438. You've never been locked up in a cellar before. It would be too much to ask you to understand how it felt. It's up to you whether to deal with it or not. You don't have to please me to make me happy. I'm not unhappy. Don't look for me about that woman in the future. I won't care. Your face is full of unhappiness. The more Mo Lien listened, the more flustered he became. She wasn't angry, she was furious. He thought about it and became more and more flustered. He could only use the stupidest method, which was to hold her tightly in his arms and kiss her. I'll listen to you. Let that woman go up to the city tower tonight. Let everyone know that this woman only has herself to blame. She deserves to be punished. Arbor was annoyed by his tight embrace. She didn't manage to push his hand away twice. She glared at him. You're sick. Emolien nodded repeatedly. As he nibbled on her, he whined pitifully, Yes, I'm sick. I must take the antidote. Arbor rolled her eyes at him. She felt that her anger came out of nowhere. Jojo's lotus seemed a little unlucky and innocent, but it was probably the word cellar that triggered her nerves. Arbor thought, staying in that dark place all year round, hiding in a corner, having rats nibbling on her toes, she shuddered. Mo Lien immediately sensed it, and his arms tightened again, wrapping her tightly around him. Don't be afraid, Jojo. Even if the sky falls and the earth shatters, I'll be by your side. Chow Mu's heart softened when she saw that he was even more nervous than she was. A nameless fire came and left quickly, and she felt rather helpless as she looked at him. That was indeed the case. Why would she be angry at him for no reason? Jojo's lotus didn't know anything. How would she know that the word cellar could trigger her nerves? That night, the decree to strip the National Security Agency of his title came down. The National Security Agency's corpse was also hung up on the city tower. The crime of bullying the good and taking advantage of the good and handsome men was also clearly written down. Everyone spurned and cursed and praised His Majesty and the Empress for being wise and for not bending the law for favoritism. When the news reached the old king of Giant Pain's ears, the old man's body trembled. He immediately gave himself a thumbs up in his heart. When he heard the crown prince's words of not recognizing even his own family from the servants, he immediately discussed with his son for an entire night and decided to continue to close the doors and decline visitors. At this time, one must not provoke the crown prince. Who knew who would be the next unlucky one? See, the National Security Agency is in big trouble now. It was still their king, Giant Pain's mansion, that was wise. Long before the new year, they had closed their doors and refused to receive guests, squatting at home to count mushrooms. If he didn't see anyone, there wouldn't be any trouble, and he wouldn't be scolded by the crown prince and his wife. Wise too wise. Look at what happened to the National Security Agency, and then look at himself. The old king of Giant Pain silently ordered his men to continue to close the door tightly. He wrote a memorial to be presented to the great emperor the next day, and once again asked for an illness to recuperate at home for a month. When the great emperor received the booklet from his old brother, he was so angry that he laughed. He didn't expect that this cowardly brother of his really had some foresight. When the crown prince's uncles, 7 aunts, and 8 aunts heard the news and received the first-hand information, other than Prince Kong, who laughed until he slapped his thigh, everyone else silently held a family meeting. They repeatedly warned the younger generation in the family not to court death. If they court death on the crown princess's head, they would really die. For 3 days in a row, the empress sent the head palace maid, Pearl, to deliver snacks to the young crown princess. Chapter 5439. Only when she received her daughter-in-law's return gift 3 days later did she silently heave a sigh of relief. She turned around and angrily scolded the emperor. Next time, don't make me go and find out what's going on. Look at what you've done. I already said, how can I touch the national security? It's not like I have nothing better to do. That day, I brought my daughter-in-law to destroy Zhao Guang's base. Are you stupid? You're always so suspicious, thinking that the young couple went to assassinate the national security. You even insisted that they go to the national security residence. If they didn't go, wouldn't it be fine? Look at how angry my father was. He went back to Glory City early this morning. Don't do it in the future. She had not been able to eat or sleep well for the past 3 days. The moment she closed her eyes, she would see her daughter-in-law looking at her coldly. She was afraid that her daughter-in-law would dislike her. Wouldn't she be wronged to death if that happened? The matter was caused by the emperor. The trouble was caused by the national security. What did it have to do with her? She was really wronged. She was on tenterhooks for several days and asked Pearl to plead for peace every day. Needless to say, when her daughter-in-law's expressionless face rose from the floor coldly, it made people's hearts in a mess. The emperor was angrily scolded by his daughter-in-law and vented all his anger on the courtiers. In the future, don't casually find trouble with the crown princess. If something happens, no one can save you. Don't blame me for not informing you in advance. I can't save you either. The aggrieved courtiers. Big brother, none of us provoked her. Wasn't this recruited by the national security of your family? What's going on? Big brother, you're the emperor. You have the final say. We know that you kowtowed to your daughter-in-law and were scolded by her. You're a pitiful man. We'll forgive you. Speaking of which, the courtiers had already seen the reality. Ever since General Zhongli's family was transferred out of the capital and left the national political stage alone, didn't everyone know that the crown princess was not to be trifled with? Who would provoke that little fiend for no reason? They had warned their madams and misses 800 years ago not to court death. No one can save you if you court death. It rained this morning, but the weather began to clear up in the afternoon. Jojo sat by the window with Dolly in his arms. He flipped through the book in his hand, listlessly. Emolien ran all the way in and saw her son lying quietly in her wife's arms. There was a suspicious glint at the corner of his mouth. Emolien quickly ran over and hugged Arbor. He lowered his head and kissed her on the forehead. Jojo, did you miss your husband? The past 2 days have been worrying him to death. For some reason, Jojo did not like to talk much. It was as if he had returned to the way he was a few years ago. She would occasionally answer his questions, but most of the time, she would be in a daze. This feeling of not being able to blend in with him made him panic for no reason. After hurriedly finishing up the matters at hand, the first thing Emolien did was come back to see Qiao Qiao. Arbor looked up and glanced at her. Your grandfather returned to the glorious city this morning. Emolien's heart skipped a beat. She quickly nodded beside her and said, Yes, yes, yes. What's wrong? Nothing. He's probably very angry with me, Arbor said lightly. The old man is very angry about the national security incident. Emolien quickly sat up and took Arbor's little hand. She said softly, Actually, the old man just can't swallow his pride. He's not angry with you. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.